The wind didn't howl anymore. It screamed. Ethan Cross stood at the barn door, one hand braced against the warped wood, watching the blizzard erase his world. Snow came sideways, violent and thick, turning the pasture into a wall of white nothing. He couldn't see the fence line, couldn't see the road, couldn't even see the house, though it sat barely 50 yards away. 3 years on this land, and he'd learned winter's moods. This wasn't just cold. This was the kind of storm that buried livestock standing up and turned men into frozen statues before they realized they were dying. "Papa!" He turned. His daughter Sarah stood in the barn's dim interior, 8 years old and reed-thin, holding a kerosene lamp that made her shadow dance across the hay bales. Her brother Michael, just 6, peered from behind her shoulder, eyes wide. "Storm's getting worse," Ethan said, forcing his voice steady. "We need to check the animals one more time, then get back inside." "The radio said it'll last 3 days," Sarah said. She had her mother's eyes, dark and questioning, always searching for truth beneath his words. "Radio's been wrong before." "Not about storms." "Smart kid." Too smart sometimes. Ethan moved past her, counting heads in the half-light. 2 milk cows huddled together for warmth. The old mare, Dancer, stamping restlessly in her stall. 7 chickens roosting high, their feathers puffed against the cold. "Where's the rooster?" Michael asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Probably already frozen somewhere. We'll look tomorrow." "But tomorrow, Michael." The boy's face crumpled, but he didn't argue. "Good." Ethan didn't have patience for tears tonight, not with the temperature dropping so fast he could see his breath crystallize in the air. He was checking the mare's water trough when he heard it. A sound. Wrong. Out of place. He froze, listening past the wind's fury. There. Again. Not an animal sound. Not the creak of old wood or the groan of settling snow. Human. "Get behind me," Ethan said quietly. Sarah grabbed Michael's hand. They knew that tone. Knew to obey without question. Ethan moved to the barn door, slid it open a crack. The wind punched through immediately, so cold it burned his lungs. He squinted into the white chaos, seeing nothing, hearing. There. Movement. A shape, darker than the snow, stumbling through the drifts near the fence. Too small to be a man. Too erratic to be anything but dying. "Stay here," he commanded, and pushed out into the storm before Sarah could protest. The cold hit like a physical blow. Within 3 steps, snow had invaded his collar, his sleeves, found every gap in his clothing. He kept his eyes barely slitted, following that stumbling shadow. Closer now. A person, definitely. Falling, rising, falling again. Ethan reached them just as they collapsed face down. A woman. Young, maybe late 20s. Dark hair matted with ice and snow. No coat, just a thin dress, torn and frozen stiff. Her exposed skin had gone the grayish blue of severe frostbite. She should already be dead. He dropped to his knees, rolled her over. Her lips were blue, eyes closed, but when he pressed fingers to her throat, he felt it. A pulse, thready and weak. But there. For one long moment, Ethan didn't move. He thought about walking away, about letting the storm finish what it started. He had 2 children in that barn, a winter that could still kill all of them, and exactly 0 room for complications in his life. This woman was a complication. Had to be. Nobody ended up alone in a blizzard like this by accident. Her eyelids fluttered, opened halfway. She looked at him without seeing, her lips forming words he couldn't hear over the wind. Then her hand moved, lifted, reached for his face with fingers so frozen they barely bent. She whispered something. He leaned closer. "Please." One word, barely audible. Then her hand fell, and her eyes closed again. Ethan cursed, low and vicious and pointless. Then he scooped her up. She weighed almost nothing, and fought his way back through the storm. Aunt. Sarah's face went white when he carried the woman into the barn. "Is she dead?" Michael asked, his voice small. "Not yet." Ethan laid her on a pile of hay, already working to strip off the frozen dress. "Sarah, get the blankets from the tack room. Michael, fill a bucket with lukewarm water, not hot, warm." They moved without hesitation, used to emergency. Ranch life taught you that. Ethan worked methodically, clinical, trying not to see the person, just the problem. The dress came off in pieces, fabric tearing where ice had fused it to skin. Underneath, more damage. Bruises, old and new. A cut on her shoulder, partially healed. Scratches on her arms that looked deliberate, defensive. Someone had hurt this woman before the storm found her. Sarah returned with 3 wool blankets. Together they wrapped her, careful of the worst frostbite on her fingers and toes. Those might be lost already. Ethan had seen it before, flesh gone black, too far gone to save. Will she live? Sarah asked. I don't know. What's her name? I don't know that either. Then who is she? Sarah. Ethan's voice came sharper than intended. He softened it. I don't know, but we're going to find out. The woman's breathing stayed shallow, ragged. Her skin felt like ice that refused to warm. Ethan knew the signs. Severe hypothermia, the body shutting down to preserve the core. She needed heat, fluids, and probably a doctor. They had none of those things. Not in this storm. We need to get her to the house, he said finally. Sarah, run ahead and get the fire built up. Michael, help me carry her. The journey from barn to house was only 50 yards, but it took 10 minutes of brutal fighting through snow that had drifted waist-high against the porch. By the time they got her inside, Ethan's clothes were frozen solid, and his daughter had the wood stove roaring like a furnace. They laid the woman on the old sofa near the fire. Ethan piled more blankets on her, then stood back, breathing hard, watching for any sign of improvement. Nothing. She lay utterly still, her face a pale mask. Papa, Sarah said quietly, her lips are moving. He knelt beside the sofa. Sarah was right. The woman's mouth worked slightly, forming words without sound. Ethan leaned close, his ear nearly touching her lips. Coming, she breathed. They're coming. Then nothing more. The storm raged for 3 days. On the first day, the woman didn't wake. Ethan kept her by the fire, checking her pulse every hour, forcing sugar water between her lips when he could. The frostbite on her fingers had started to blister, painful but potentially survivable. Her toes worried him more. Sarah watched from the kitchen table, pretending to do schoolwork while actually tracking every movement he made. You're staring, Ethan said without looking up. You're worried. I'm always worried. Not like this. He glanced at her. Finish your arithmetic. She didn't. Mama used to say you had a tell. When you were really scared, you'd press your thumb against your wedding ring. You've done it 17 times since breakfast. Ethan's hand stilled. He wasn't even aware he'd been doing it. The ring sat loose on his finger now. He'd lost weight this past year, and the gold band that Anna had placed there 8 years ago didn't fit quite right anymore. Mama noticed a lot of things, he said quietly. She said it meant you cared too much, that you couldn't turn your heart off even when you should. Your mother was too generous in her observations. Was she wrong? Ethan looked at his daughter, this fierce, observant child who'd had to grow up too fast. No, he admitted. She wasn't wrong. Sarah nodded, satisfied, and actually returned to her arithmetic. The woman stirred that evening, just a small movement, her head turning toward the fire's warmth. Ethan was there immediately, pressing his palm to her forehead. Still cool, but warmer than before. Her breathing had evened out. Can you hear me? He asked. No response. But her eyelids flickered like she was dreaming. On the second day, the fever came. It started just before dawn. Ethan woke on the floor beside the sofa. He'd been sleeping there, not trusting her condition, and found her skin burning hot to touch. She thrashed under the blankets, muttering words that made no sense. No, can't, won't go back. Please. He stripped off the excess blankets, replaced them with a single sheet, and started the cycle of cool cloths and forced water. Sarah helped without being asked, bringing fresh water from the pump, wringing out cloths with practiced efficiency. She's fighting something, Sarah observed, inside her head. Fever does that. Makes you see things that aren't there. Or remember things that are. Too perceptive. Always too perceptive. The fever broke near midnight. The woman fell into a deep, genuine sleep, her breathing slow and regular. Ethan finally let himself relax, slumping back against the wall. You should sleep in your bed, Sarah said from the doorway. She stood in her nightgown, another blanket draped over her shoulders. I'm fine here. Papa. Sarah. They looked at each other. Then Sarah crossed the room and sat beside him, leaning against his shoulder. Together they watched the fire burn low, listening to the wind batter the house. "Are we in trouble?" she asked quietly. Ethan wanted to lie. Wanted to tell her everything would be fine, that bringing this stranger into their home was nothing to worry about. But he'd promised Anna before she died that he'd never lie to their children. Not about the things that mattered. "I don't know yet," he said. "But we'll handle it, whatever comes." Together? Always together. Sarah nodded and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep against his shoulder. Ethan shifted carefully, not wanting to wake her, and watched the woman on the sofa breathe. She'd said they were coming, whoever they were. He'd find out soon enough. On the third day, she opened her eyes. Ethan was feeding the stove when he heard her move. He turned and found her staring at him with eyes that were startlingly blue, wide and alert and afraid. "Easy," he said, holding up one hand. "You're safe. You're in my home." She tried to sit up, failed, fell back with a gasp of pain. "Don't move too fast. You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your body needs time." "Where?" Her voice came out as a croak, barely audible. He brought her water, helped her sip slowly. "You're at the Cross Ranch, about 15 miles north of Frost Creek. I found you in the storm. Do you remember?" She drank, then shook her head. There was snow. So much snow and cold, I thought I was going to die." "You nearly did. Another hour, and you would have." She looked down at her bandaged hands, flexed her fingers experimentally, winced. "How bad?" "Some frostbite. You might lose a few toes, but you'll live. Lucky me." The words came bitter, hollow. Ethan studied her face, mid-20s he'd guess, sharp features made sharper by exhaustion and hunger. A small scar near her left eye, another on her jaw. Old injuries, long healed. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, long enough that he knew she was considering lying. "Lydia," she said finally. "Lydia Hale. Ethan Cross. Those are my children, Sarah and Michael." He gestured to where the kids watched from the kitchen doorway. "You're safe here, Ms. Hale, but I need to know what you were running from." Her face went carefully blank. "I wasn't running." "You were wearing a summer dress in a February blizzard. No coat, no shoes, no supplies. You were either running or you're the most unprepared traveler in Wyoming history." "Maybe I'm just stupid." "You don't strike me as stupid." She met his eyes, held his gaze. He saw something there, calculation, fear, defiance, all mixed together. "If I tell you," she said slowly, "you'll wish you'd left me in the snow. Try me. Mr. Cross, Ethan. Ethan." She said his name like she was testing it. "You seem like a good man. Good men don't survive what's coming for me." "Let me worry about that. I'm serious. The people looking for me, they have money, power, connections. They don't stop. They don't forgive. And anyone who helps me becomes a target." "Is that what you were trying to tell me? When I found you? That they were coming?" Her eyes widened slightly. "I said that?" "You did." She looked away toward the frosted window where gray daylight filtered through. "Then you know. You know you should have left me there." "Maybe, but I didn't." "Why not?" Ethan didn't have a good answer for that. Didn't fully understand himself why he'd made that choice in the storm. He'd spent the last year trying to keep his world small, safe, controllable. Bringing this woman inside violated every rule of self-preservation he'd established. But when she'd reached for him with those frozen fingers, whispered that single word, please, something in him had broken. Or maybe healed, he wasn't sure which. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. Lydia laughed, no humor in it. The right thing is going to get you killed. Then I'll die doing something right for a change." She studied him with those unsettling blue eyes. "You don't know me. Don't know what I've done. No. But I know what I've done, and I know what I haven't. This," he gestured between them, "this is something I can control. The storm delivered you to my door. What happens next is my choice." Noble words. Just words. "We'll see if I live up to them." Sarah appeared at his elbow, carrying a bowl of soup. She should eat, his daughter announced, with the absolute certainty only an 8-year-old could manage. Lydia's expression softened slightly. Thank you, she said, accepting the bowl with trembling hands. She ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd gone hungry before. Ethan watched and said nothing. Sarah lingered nearby, openly curious in the way children are. How old are you? Sarah asked. Sarah, Ethan warned. It's okay. Lydia managed a small smile. I'm 26. You're pretty, even with the bruises. Sarah! Papa, she is. Mama always said honesty was important. Lydia's smile grew genuine. Your mama sounds wise. She was. She died last year. Cancer. The words hung in the air. Ethan felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Grief that never quite left, just shifted and settled into different corners of his ribs. I'm sorry, Lydia said softly. That must have been very hard. It was, but Papa says we honor her by living well, by being good people even when it's hard. Sounds like your papa is wise too. Sarah beamed. Michael, emboldened by his sister's success, crept closer. Did you really almost die? He asked. Michael? Yes, Lydia answered. I really did. Were you scared? Terrified. Papa says being brave means being scared, but doing the thing anyway. Your papa's full of wisdom, apparently. Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. All right, you two. Let her eat in peace. The children retreated, satisfied with their interrogation. Lydia finished the soup, then set the bowl aside with a sigh. Thank you, she said, for the food, for everything. You can thank me by telling me the truth. Who's coming for you? The softness left her face immediately. She looked toward the window again, and Ethan saw real fear there. My husband, she said quietly. Or rather, the man my family says is my husband, Jonathan Hale. His family owns half the county, land, businesses, the sheriff, probably the judge too. They have enough money to make problems disappear. And you're a problem. I'm his property. At least that's how he sees it. Her hands tightened on the blanket. We were married 6 months ago. It was arranged, my father's debts in exchange for the union. I didn't have a choice. Or I thought I didn't. What changed? She met his eyes. I realized being dead might be better than being owned, so I ran. In a blizzard, without supplies. The storm wasn't supposed to hit until tomorrow. I had a bag, food, some money, but the weather turned early and... She shrugged. Everything went wrong. How long were you out there? 2 days, maybe? I lost track. I was trying to reach the train depot in Kearney. It's 40 miles. I made it maybe 15 before the worst of the storm caught me. 40 miles on foot in winter. Ethan reassessed his estimation of this woman's desperation. Nobody made that attempt unless they had no other options. You said they're coming, he prompted. When the storm clears, they'll search. Jonathan doesn't let go of his possessions easily. He'll bring men, resources. They'll check every ranch, every farm, every building between his estate and Kearney. She looked directly at him. They'll come here, Ethan, and when they do, you need to tell them you never saw me. And you'll be where? Gone. I'll leave tonight. You can barely sit up. I'll manage. To go where? Into another storm? You'll die. Better than the alternative. Which is what, exactly? Her jaw tightened. You don't want to know. Try me. Jonathan. She stopped, swallowed hard. Jonathan likes control, likes obedience. When he doesn't get it, he teaches lessons. The bruises you saw? Those were from asking questions, from suggesting I might like to visit my sister in Denver, from... Her voice cracked. It doesn't matter. What matters is that if he finds me here, he'll assume you helped me. He'll ruin you. Take your land, your children, everything. Let him try. You don't understand. Men like Jonathan don't try. They succeed. They have lawyers, judges, law enforcement, all paid for. They write the rules. Maybe, but they don't own me. Lydia laughed again, that same hollow sound. No one owns you yet. Give it time. Ethan stood, crossed to the window. Outside, the storm had finally begun to ease. He could see the barn again, buried under 3 feet of snow. The fence posts were completely covered. It would take days to dig out. Here's what's going to happen, he said, not turning around. You're going to stay here until you're well enough to travel properly. Not stumbling through snow, but actually travel. I'm going to make sure you have supplies, money, a real chance. And when you leave, it'll be on your terms, not because you're desperate and broken. Ethan, and if Jonathan Hale comes to my door, I'll tell him the truth, that I found a woman dying in a storm and I saved her life. What he does with that information is his problem, not mine. You're insane. Probably. He turned to face her. But I'm also done running from trouble, done making the safe choice. My wife died last year, and you know what I learned? Safety is an illusion. Bad things happen regardless, so I might as well do some good while I can. Lydia stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You realize you're risking everything for a stranger. I'm risking everything for what's right. There's a difference. Not to your children, there isn't. What happens to them if Jonathan destroys you? That hit home. Ethan felt it like a punch to his gut. Sarah and Michael had already lost their mother. What right did he have to risk their security for a woman he'd known for 3 days? But then he thought about Anna, about the promises they'd made to each other, to raise children who knew the difference between right and wrong, to never let fear make them small. My children, he said slowly, will learn that sometimes you stand up for people, even when it's hard, even when it costs something. That's the lesson I want them to know. That's the lesson that gets people killed. Maybe. But it's also the lesson that makes life worth living. Silence fell between them. Outside, the wind had dropped to a whisper. The worst of the storm had passed. Lydia closed her eyes. When she opened them again, some of the hardness had left her face. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, I'll stay. But only until I'm strong enough to leave properly. And the moment they come looking, I disappear. I won't let you sacrifice your family for me. Fair enough? I mean it, Ethan. When the time comes, you let me go. When the time comes, we'll see. She looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion was already pulling her back down. Her eyelids drooped. Within moments, she was asleep again. Ethan returned to the window, watching the clearing sky. Somewhere out there, a man was probably already planning his search, gathering his resources, preparing to reclaim what he considered his property. Let him come. Ethan Cross had spent a year being afraid of failing his children, afraid of making another mistake, afraid of life itself. He was done with fear. Whatever came next, he'd face it standing. The days that followed established a rhythm. Lydia recovered slowly. Her frostbite proved less severe than initially feared. She'd keep all her toes, though some would bear permanent scars. The bruises faded. Color returned to her face. By the end of the first week, she could stand without assistance. By the second, she insisted on helping with chores. You don't have to, Ethan said, watching her struggle to chop carrots with bandaged hands. I'm not a guest, she replied. If I'm staying, I'm working. Sarah approved. She'd taken to Lydia immediately, shadowing her through the house, asking endless questions. Lydia answered with patience Ethan wouldn't have managed. Michael remained more cautious, but even he warmed when Lydia helped him build a snow fort during a rare sunny afternoon. Ethan tried not to notice how the house felt different with her there, warmer somehow, more alive, like the building had been holding its breath for a year and finally remembered how to exhale. He tried not to notice other things too, the way Lydia smiled when Sarah said something clever, the concentration on her face when she learned to manage the wood stove, the quiet strength in her movements as she healed. He especially tried not to notice how she looked in the morning, standing at the kitchen window with coffee, watching the sun rise over snow-covered fields. You're staring, Sarah said one morning. Ethan jerked his attention back to his breakfast. I'm not. You were. You had the look. What look? The one Mama used to get when she'd watch you work in the barn, all soft and happy. I was just thinking, that's all. Damn. Too perceptive. But Sarah was right, and he knew it. Something was shifting in him, something dangerous and hopeful and terrifying all at once. He'd loved Anna with everything he had. Her loss had carved a hole in him so deep he'd thought it would never close. For months, just breathing hurt. Just existing felt like betrayal. Now, slowly, that wound was beginning to scar over. Not healed, it would never fully heal, but changed. Different. And Lydia was part of that change. He didn't know how, didn't fully understand why. But having her there, watching her rebuild herself piece by piece, reminded him that life could still surprise you, could still offer second chances when you least expected them. "Papa?" Sarah's voice pulled him back. "Hmm?" "She's scared. I can tell." "I know." "What's she scared of?" "Same thing we all are, getting hurt again." "Are you going to let her get hurt?" Ethan looked at his daughter, this fierce, loving, impossibly brave child. "No," he said, "I'm not." "Good." Sarah nodded, satisfied. "Because I like her, and Michael likes her, and I think Mama would have liked her too." The words hit him square in the chest. Anna would have liked Lydia, would have seen past the fear and defensive walls to the person underneath, would have probably told Ethan to stop being an idiot and admit what he was feeling. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think she would have." 3 weeks after Lydia's arrival, the riders came. Ethan was in the barn when he heard the horses. He stepped outside and counted 5 men on horseback, picking their way through the snow toward his house. Well-dressed, well-armed, moving with the confidence of people who expected compliance. His gut tightened. Through the kitchen window, he saw Lydia freeze. She'd seen them too. Ethan crossed to the house in long strides. "Take the children upstairs," he told her quietly. "Stay there. Don't come down no matter what you hear." "Ethan, please, trust me." She looked at him for one long moment, then nodded. "Sarah, Michael, with me. Now." The children obeyed without question, though Sarah shot him a worried look over her shoulder. Ethan waited until he heard the upstairs floorboards creak, then stepped onto the porch as the riders approached. They stopped at his fence line. The lead rider, a big man in an expensive coat, studied him with cold assessment. "Ethan Cross?" the man called. "That's right." "I'm Marshall Davies from Frost Creek. We're looking for a woman, Lydia Hale, dark hair, mid-20s, went missing from her home about a month ago during the storm. Her family's concerned." Marshall. Shit. Jonathan had gotten law enforcement involved. Of course he had. "Haven't seen anyone like that," Ethan said evenly. "You sure about that? Storm was pretty bad. Maybe someone sought shelter here." "Just me and my kids. Nobody else." Davy's eyes narrowed. "You mind if we look around, just to be thorough?" "I mind. This is private property, Marshal. Unless you have a warrant, you can turn around and ride back the way you came." Now that's an interesting response. Makes a man wonder what you're hiding. Makes a man wonder why a marshal is doing errands for rich families instead of actual law work. Davy's expression hardened. "Careful, Cross. I'm trying to be civil here. And I'm telling you politely to get off my land." One of the other riders, younger, meaner-looking, moved his hand toward his gun. Ethan didn't flinch. "You really want to do this?" he asked quietly. "You really want to draw on a man standing on his own porch in front of his children's bedroom window?" The young rider hesitated, looked to Davies. The marshal held up a hand. "Stand down!" He focused back on Ethan. "You're making a mistake, Cross. The Hale family has resources, friends in every county. If you're harboring their daughter-in-law, you're committing a crime. Harboring implies she's a criminal. Last I checked, a woman has the right to leave her husband. Not when there's legal proceedings involved. Not when she's been declared unstable and in need of protection." "Protection? That what you call it?" "That's what the courts call it." "The courts that the Hale family owns?" Davies' jaw tightened. "One more time, Cross. Have you seen Lydia Hale?" "One more time, Marshal. Get off my property." For a long moment they stared at each other. Ethan kept his hands visible, his posture relaxed, but inside his heart hammered. If this went bad, if they forced their way in, Davies finally nodded. "All right, we'll go. But Cross, this isn't over. The Hales don't give up. They'll be back with proper authority. And when they come, you'll wish you'd cooperated today." "I'll take my chances." The marshal turned his horse. The other riders followed, though the young one shot Ethan a look that promised violence. Ethan watched them disappear down the road. Only when they were completely out of sight did he allow himself to breathe. The door opened behind him. Lydia stepped out, her face pale. "They know," she whispered. "They know I'm here." "They suspect. They don't know." "It's the same thing. They'll come back, Ethan, with warrants, with more men, with legal authority. You can't fight that. Watch me. This isn't a game. These people will destroy you." Then they'll destroy me, but I'm not handing you over like some piece of property. Lydia grabbed his arm, her grip desperate. Why? Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything. Ethan turned to face her, looked into those frightened blue eyes, and found himself saying the truth before he could stop it. Because you matter. Because every person who gets trampled by powerful men matters. And because he stopped, swallowed. Because I've spent the last year just surviving, just existing. And helping you feels like the first time I've actually lived since Anna died. The words hung between them. Lydia's eyes filled with tears. Ethan, you asked me why. That's why. Now we can either give up or we can fight. Your choice. She wiped her eyes roughly. If we fight, people will get hurt. Your children, my children will learn that their father stood for something. That when it mattered, he chose right over easy. This is insane. Probably. We can't win. Maybe not, but we can try. Lydia looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Okay. We fight. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. Then we'd better prepare, he said, because they're coming back, and next time they won't be asking politely. From the upstairs window, Sarah and Michael watched. Sarah's small hand found her brother's. Papa's going to fight for her, Michael said. I know. Is that good? Sarah thought about it, thought about their mama, who taught them about courage, about doing what was right even when it scared you. Yeah, she said finally, I think it is. The storm had passed, but another one was building on the horizon, and this time it would take more than warmth and blankets to survive. The lawyer arrived on a Tuesday morning, alone and unannounced. Ethan saw the buggy coming from a mile away, black and polished, pulled by a horse too fine for ranch country. He set down the axe he'd been using to split wood and waited, watching the vehicle navigate the muddy road left by the spring thaw. Lydia appeared at his shoulder. She'd been helping Sarah with laundry, her sleeves rolled up, hands red from the work. In the months since the marshal's visit, she'd transformed from a half-frozen stranger into something closer to family. She knew where the plates belonged, how Michael liked his eggs, which boards on the porch creaked loudest. Company, Ethan said quietly. Her face went tight. Should I hide? No, we're past that now. The buggy stopped at the fence. A man climbed down, 50s, gray hair, expensive suit that looked ridiculous out here in the mud and melting snow. He carried a leather satchel and an expression of practiced sympathy. Mr. Cross? He called. My name is Harold Brennan. I represent the Hale family. Might I have a word? Ethan didn't move from the porch. You're having it. Brennan approached the fence, but didn't cross it. Smart man. I understand you've had visitors from the marshal's office. That must have been distressing. Wasn't particularly pleasant. I imagine not. And I apologize for any heavy-handedness. Marshal Davies can be overzealous in his duties. Brennan's smile never reached his eyes. I'm here to offer a more civilized resolution to this unfortunate situation. What situation would that be? The matter of Mrs. Lydia Hale, who I believe is currently residing in your home. Beside him, Ethan felt Lydia stiffen. He kept his voice level. And if she is? Then I'm authorized to offer you compensation for your troubles. Shall we say $500 for your kindness in providing temporary shelter during the storm? No questions asked, no legal complications. You simply allow Mrs. Hale to return home with me, and this unpleasantness ends. $500. Nearly 2 years' income for a ranch this size. Ethan felt the weight of it, the temptation. With that money, he could fix the barn roof, buy better livestock, secure his children's future. That's generous, he said. Brennan's smile widened. Mr. Hale is nothing if not generous. He simply wants his wife returned safely. Surely you can understand a husband's concern. I can understand a lot of things, Mr. Brennan. Question is whether you can. The smile faltered. I'm not sure I follow. Do you understand what it means when a woman runs barefoot through a blizzard rather than stay in her husband's house? Do you understand the kind of fear that takes? Mr. Cross, I assure you, any misunderstandings between Mr. and Mrs. Hale can be resolved privately. She's not going back. The words came from Lydia. She stepped forward, her chin lifted, hands clenched at her sides. I'm not going back, Mr. Brennan. Not for $500. Not for 5,000. Not ever. Brennan's expression shifted, the false warmth draining away. Mrs. Hale, I was hoping to conduct this conversation reasonably. There's nothing reasonable about trying to buy me like livestock. Your husband is concerned about your welfare. You disappeared without word during dangerous weather. He's been frantic. He's been angry. There's a difference. You're not well, Mrs. Hale. The physicians have documented your instability. This flight of fancy, this rebellion, it's symptomatic of a deeper illness. Your husband only wants to provide proper care. Lydia laughed, sharp and bitter. Care. Is that what we're calling it? Tell me, Mr. Brennan, do your physicians document bruises? Do they measure the force required to crack a rib? Do they categorize different types of fear? Brennan's jaw tightened. Those are serious accusations. They're serious truths, which you'd be hard-pressed to prove in any court of law. I know, that's why I'm not going back. For a moment, the lawyer just looked at her. Then he turned his attention back to Ethan. Mr. Cross, you seem like a reasonable man, a father. Surely you understand the position you're putting yourself in, harboring another man's wife. She's not property, Ethan cut in. She's a person, and she's made her choice. A choice she's not legally entitled to make. Mr. Hale has obtained a court order declaring his wife incompetent and in need of protective custody. If you continue to harbor her, you're in violation of that order. The consequences could be severe. Let them be severe. Brennan sighed like he was dealing with a particularly stubborn child. Think about your children, Mr. Cross. Think about what happens when this goes to court. When your land is seized to pay the legal fees. When you're declared an unfit parent for defying the law. Is this woman really worth your children's future? The words hit like a physical blow. Ethan felt them land, felt the doubt they were designed to create. He glanced at the house, where Sarah watched from the window, her small face pressed against the glass. My children's future, he said slowly, is built on them knowing their father stood for what was right. I'll take my chances with the law. Then you're a fool. Maybe, but I'm a fool who can live with himself. Brennan shook his head. Very well, I've made my offer in good faith. What happens next is on your conscience. He climbed back into his buggy, then paused. One more thing, Mr. Cross. The Hale family has deep roots in this territory, deep connections. When this goes to court, and it will, you'll find those connections reach farther than you imagine. Judges, land offices, supply merchants, banks, all of it. You're making an enemy you can't afford. I'll manage. For your children's sake, I hope you're right. The buggy rolled away, leaving deep ruts in the mud. Ethan watched it go, feeling the weight of the threat settle over him like a wet blanket. I should leave, Lydia said quietly. Tonight, before this gets worse. No. Ethan, he's right. They'll destroy you, take everything. Let them try. He turned to face her. You heard what I told him. I meant it. Every word. Even the part about your children's future, that stopped him. Because yes, that part terrified him. The idea of Sarah and Michael suffering because of his choices, losing their home, their security. It ate at him like acid. But the alternative, teaching them to surrender to bullies, to let fear make their decisions, that seemed worse somehow. Especially that part, he said finally. Because if I back down now, what am I teaching them? That power wins? That might makes right. That the only thing that matters is protecting yourself? You're teaching them to survive. I'm teaching them to be afraid. There's a difference. Lydia looked at him with something between admiration and despair. You're going to lose everything. Maybe, but I won't lose myself. She reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand on his arm. The touch burned through his sleeve. Thank you, she whispered, for being stubborn and foolish and brave. I'm not brave, I'm just tired of running. From what? Ethan thought about the last year. About Anna's slow decline, his helplessness watching her fade. About the funeral where he'd stood like a statue, unable to cry, unable to feel anything but hollow. About the months after, just going through motions, just surviving. From living, he said. I've been running from actually living. This, standing up, fighting back. It feels like the first real thing I've done since Anna died. Lydia's eyes glistened. She'd be proud of you, or she'd think I'm an idiot. Both can be true. That surprised a laugh from him. Lydia smiled, and for a moment the fear lifted from her face. She looked younger, lighter, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with features and everything to do with spirit. The moment stretched. Ethan became acutely aware of how close she stood, of her hand still resting on his arm, of the way she was looking at him. "Papa?" Sarah's voice broke the spell. She stood in the doorway, Michael behind her. "Is everything okay?" Ethan stepped back, clearing his throat. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just some visitors." "Bad visitors?" "Complicated visitors, but they're gone now." Sarah studied him with those two perceptive eyes. "You're worried." "A little." "Are we in trouble?" He could lie, should probably lie, but Anna's voice echoed in his head, "Always tell them the truth." "We might be," he admitted. "The people looking for Lydia, they're powerful. They might try to make things difficult for us." "Will they take our house?" "They'll try." "What if they succeed?" Ethan crouched down to her level. "Then we'll find somewhere else to live. We'll adapt. We'll survive. We always do." "Because we're cross-family?" "Because we're cross-family." Michael pushed past his sister, his young face serious. "I don't want Lydia to go away." "I know, buddy. She makes good pancakes. Better than yours." Despite everything, Ethan smiled. "That's true, she does. And she's nice. She helps with my drawings. She is nice. So we should keep her." Out of the mouths of children, Ethan pulled his son into a hug. "We're going to try, Michael. We're going to try very hard." Over Michael's head, he met Lydia's gaze. She'd pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of fear this time, something else, something that looked almost like hope. The days that followed brought an uneasy peace. Spring arrived in earnest, melting the last of the snow, turning the ground to soup. Ethan threw himself into ranch work, repairing fences, mucking stalls, preparing fields for planting. Physical labor that left him too tired to think, to worry, to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. Lydia worked beside him, not like a guest anymore, not even like hired help, like a partner. She learned quickly, adapted to the rhythm of ranch life with surprising ease. Within a week, she could milk the cows without complaint, handle the chickens without getting pecked, even manage the stubborn mare that usually only tolerated Ethan. "You're good at this," he commented one evening, watching her feed the animals with practiced efficiency. She shrugged. "I grew up on a farm, before my father lost it to gambling debts, before he sold me to pay what he owed." The casual way she said it, "sold me," made Ethan's blood run cold. "That's what the marriage was? Payment?" That's exactly what it was. Jonathan's family needed respectability, connections to old farming families. My father needed money. I was the transaction that satisfied both. That's not legal, isn't it? I signed the papers, spoke the vows. Legally, I'm his wife. The fact that I had no real choice doesn't matter to the law. It should matter. A lot of things should matter that don't. She closed the feed bin, dusted off her hands. But you know what does matter? This, right here, working with animals that don't care about my last name or my husband's money, just whether I remember to feed them on time. Simple things. Simple things, she agreed. I'd forgotten how good simple could be. They walked back to the house together, the evening light painting everything gold. Sarah and Michael were visible through the kitchen window, working on some project at the table. The scene looked almost painfully normal, domestic, like a family. Ethan felt the weight of it, the illusion of peace, the temporary nature of this moment. Because Brennan hadn't been bluffing. The Hale family would return. And next time, they'd bring more than lawyers and threats. "What are you thinking?" Lydia asked. "That this won't last." "I know. That we should be preparing for what comes next." "I know that too." "Then why does it feel like we're just waiting?" Lydia stopped walking, turned to face him in the fading light. "Because sometimes waiting is all you can do. Sometimes you have to take the peace when it comes, even if you know it's temporary." "That's not very strategic." "No, but it's very human." She was right, and he knew it. They couldn't live in constant defensive posture, always braced for the next attack. At some point, you had to actually live, had to find moments of peace amid the chaos. "You're wiser than you look," he said. "I'm older than I look, too." 26 going on 90. You don't seem 90. Give it time. Stick around me long enough, you'll see the ancient crone emerge. I'll take my chances. The words came out more serious than he'd intended. Lydia's expression shifted, grew uncertain. Ethan. I know. Too soon, too complicated, too much at stake. I know all of it, but I'm done pretending I don't feel... He stopped, swallowed the rest of the sentence. Feel what? She asked softly. Like maybe there's something here worth fighting for beyond just doing the right thing. The silence that followed felt enormous. Lydia looked at him with eyes that held too many emotions to name. Fear, hope, longing, doubt, all of it swirling together. I can't promise you anything, she said finally. I'm still legally married, still being hunted, still might bring your whole world crashing down. I'm not asking for promises. Then what are you asking for? Ethan thought about it, about what he actually wanted from this impossible situation. Permission, he said, to hope. To imagine that maybe this doesn't end in disaster. To think that maybe, somehow, we find a way through. Lydia's breath caught. She reached up, touched his face with fingers that trembled slightly. You really are a fool. I know. A stubborn, idealistic, impossible fool. Guilty. Good. She smiled, fragile and beautiful. Because I need a fool right now. Someone who believes impossible things can happen. Do they? Can they? I don't know, but standing here with you, I almost think they might. Ethan covered her hand with his own, holding it against his cheek. For one long moment, they stood there in the twilight, pretending the world was simpler than it was. Then Michael's voice shattered the peace. Papa, Lydia, come look what we made. They broke apart, the spell dissolving, but something had shifted between them. Some invisible line crossed. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The summons arrived 2 weeks later. Ethan found it nailed to his fence post, an official document from the territorial court, sealed with wax and marked with legal stamps. He read it twice, his stomach sinking with each word. He was being sued. For harboring a fugitive wife. For interfering with marital rights. For contributing to mental incompetence. The damages sought totaled $3,000, more money than his ranch would generate in a decade, and the hearing was scheduled for 10 days from now. He brought the document inside, where Lydia sat mending one of Michael's shirts. She looked up, saw his face, and immediately set down her sewing. They're moving, she said. Not a question. Court hearing, 10 days. They're suing me for everything. She took the paper, scanned it quickly. Her face went pale. $3,000. Ethan, that's everything I have and more. I know. We need a lawyer. Can't afford one. Then we need to run. Both of us. Take the children and disappear before... No. His voice came out harder than intended. I'm done running. If they want to drag me into court, fine. I'll stand in front of their judge and tell the truth. The truth won't matter, not against their money. Maybe not, but it's all I have. Lydia stood, paced to the window. You're going to lose. You know that, right? They'll take your land, your savings, everything. And then what? How do you take care of Sarah and Michael with nothing? The same way I did when Anna died. I figure it out. That's not a plan. It's the only plan I have. They stared at each other, the tension crackling between them. Finally, Lydia's shoulders sagged. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, this is my fault, all of it. You never should have brought me inside. Don't. Ethan crossed to her, gripped her shoulders. Don't apologize for needing help. Don't apologize for existing. And sure as hell don't apologize for running from a man who hurt you. But your children, my children are learning what it means to stand up to bullies. That's worth more than money. Not if they're homeless. We won't be homeless. How can you know that? Ethan didn't have an answer. Couldn't promise her it would work out, that justice would prevail, that good intentions would somehow triumph over corrupt power. All he had was stubborn refusal to surrender. I just know, he said finally, weak but honest. Lydia searched his face. Whatever she found there made her expression soften. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we fight, but we fight smart. No more just waiting for them to make moves. What do you mean? I mean, we gather evidence, document everything, Find people who'll testify about Jonathan's character, about the bruises, about the so-called physicians who declared me incompetent without ever meeting me. Nobody's going to testify against the Hale family. Maybe not publicly, but private affidavits, written statements? There have to be other people he's hurt, other people who'd speak up if they knew they weren't alone. Ethan felt something spark in his chest. Hope, maybe. Or just the relief of having a plan beyond passive resistance. You think we can find them? I know we can. Jonathan isn't careful when he thinks he's untouchable. He's left a trail. We just have to follow it. Over the next week, they worked. Lydia wrote letters to former servants from the Hale estate, to women she'd met in town who'd whispered their own stories of abuse and control. She reached out to the physician who'd treated her broken rib, asking for medical records that might contradict the official narrative of mental instability. Ethan rode into Frost Creek, asking questions, listening to gossip, piecing together a picture of Jonathan Hale that differed sharply from his public image. A man who'd settled 3 lawsuits quietly, who'd paid off a shopkeeper's daughter after an incident nobody discussed, who'd bankrupted competitors through legal maneuvering that skirted the edges of the law. The picture that emerged was damning, but whether it would matter in court remained to be seen. On the 8th day, a response arrived. Not from any of Lydia's letters, but from someone unexpected. A lawyer from Cheyenne named Rebecca Walsh. She'd heard about the case, she wrote, and wanted to offer her services. Pro bono. Ethan read the letter 3 times, suspicious. Why would a lawyer work for free? Because she's a woman, Lydia said, scanning the letter over his shoulder. Look at her credentials. She's been fighting these cases for years, challenging marital property laws, arguing for women's autonomy. This is exactly the kind of case she lives for. And we're supposed to just trust her? Do we have a choice? Fair point. Ethan wrote back immediately, accepting the offer. Rebecca Walsh arrived 2 days before the hearing, a tall woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She spent 6 hours interviewing Lydia, taking notes, asking questions that made even Ethan uncomfortable. He hit you, she said flatly, not a question. Yes, Lydia confirmed. How many times? I lost count. Hospitalizations. Once. He said I fell down the stairs. Did you? No. Walsh wrote it all down, her expression never changing. Witnesses? The servants saw, but they won't testify. They need their positions. We'll see about that. Walsh turned to Ethan. And you? Why are you doing this? The blunt question caught him off guard. Because it's right. That's not a legal argument. It's the only one I have. Walsh studied him for a long moment. You know they're going to destroy you, right? Even if we win the case, they'll find other ways. Tax audits, property disputes, business complications. The Hale family doesn't forgive. I know. And you're still willing to stand? I am. Walsh smiled. It transformed her face, made her look years younger. Good. Then we might actually have a chance. The day before the hearing, Ethan found Sarah sitting on the porch steps, staring at nothing. He sat beside her, not speaking, just present. Are we going to lose our home? She asked finally. I don't know. That's not very comforting. No, but it's honest. Sarah leaned against his shoulder. Mama used to say honesty was more important than comfort. She was right. She was right about a lot of things. They sat in silence, watching the sun set over fields Ethan had worked for 3 years. His land, his sweat, his investment, possibly about to be taken away because he'd chosen compassion over caution. Papa? Sarah's voice came small. I'm scared. Ethan pulled her close. Me too, sweetheart. But you're still going to fight. I am. Why? He thought about how to explain it to an 8-year-old. How to make her understand that sometimes you fought battles you couldn't win because the alternative was worse than losing. Because some things are more important than being safe, he said finally. Some things matter enough to risk everything, and Lydia, what's happening to her, that matters. Do you love her? The question hit him sideways. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried to find words. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe. It's complicated. Mama would have liked her. Yeah, she would have. Then it's okay. To love her, I mean. Mama wouldn't want you to be alone forever. Ethan felt his throat tighten. 8 years old and somehow wiser than him. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice. That pulled a laugh from him. Sarah grinned, pleased with herself. Inside, through the window, he could see Lydia and Michael making dinner together. She was teaching him to roll dough, laughing when he got flour on his nose. It looked so normal, so right. Tomorrow, he might lose all of it. The land, the security, possibly even his children, if the court declared him unfit. But tonight, sitting here with his daughter, watching the makeshift family he'd built, Ethan Cross felt something he hadn't felt in over a year. Peace. Whatever tomorrow brought, he'd faced it standing. And that, he realized, was its own kind of victory. The sun dipped below the horizon. Stars emerged, sharp and bright in the clear sky. And in the little ranch house, light glowed warm against the gathering dark. Tomorrow would bring the storm. But tonight, there was only this. Only them. Only the fragile, precious present. And for now, that was enough. The courthouse in Frost Creek was the finest building for 50 miles. Red brick with white columns, built with Hale money a generation back. Ethan stood at the base of the steps, staring up at those columns, and felt the full weight of what he was walking into. Rebecca Walsh touched his elbow. Second thoughts? 102nd thoughts. Good. Means you're thinking clearly. She adjusted her briefcase, her expression all business. Remember what we discussed. Answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer information, and whatever happens, don't lose your temper. Jonathan Hale will be in there. I know. First time Lydia's seen him since she ran. I know that too. Ethan glanced back at the wagon where Lydia sat with Sarah and Michael. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had agreed to watch the children during the proceedings. Lydia's face was pale, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. He walked back to her. You don't have to go in. Walsh can present the affidavits without you testifying. No. Lydia's voice came out steady despite the fear in her eyes. I need to face him. Need to show him I'm not afraid anymore. Are you? Not afraid? She managed a weak smile. I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway. Isn't that what you taught me? That being brave means being scared and doing the thing regardless? I was quoting my 6-year-old son. Smart kid. Sarah leaned forward from the wagon seat. You look pretty, Lydia. She did. Walsh had brought a proper dress, simple, modest, the kind that said respectable woman rather than runaway wife. Her hair was pinned back, her face scrubbed clean. She looked younger than her 26 years. Vulnerable. Walsh had insisted on the look. Juries respond to images, she'd said. We need them to see a victim, not a rebellious woman. It had made Ethan's stomach turn, the calculation of it, but he understood the game they were playing. Thank you, sweetheart, Lydia said, reaching out to squeeze Sarah's hand. You be good for Mrs. Chen, okay? Both of you. We will, Michael promised. And Papa's going to win. I know he is. If only certainty were that simple. Mrs. Chen arrived in her own wagon, clucking about the early hour and the foolishness of legal proceedings. She gathered the children with practiced efficiency, promising them cookies and stories if they behaved. Ethan kissed both his children, holding on perhaps a moment too long. Sarah whispered in his ear, Be brave, Papa. I'll try. Then there was nothing left but to walk up those courthouse steps and into whatever waited inside. The courtroom was already packed. Ethan felt the weight of stairs as he entered, townspeople who'd known him for 3 years, neighbors who'd helped him after Anna died, merchants he did business with. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to judgment to outright hostility. News had spread fast. The story had gotten twisted in the telling. Some said he was hiding a criminal, others that he'd seduced another man's wife, still others that he was involved in something darker they couldn't quite name. Small towns loved their gossip, loved their scandals. Jonathan Hale sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyers, 3 of them, all in expensive suits, all radiating confidence. Hale himself was younger than Ethan expected, maybe 35, with dark hair slicked back and a face that would have been handsome if not for the coldness in his eyes. Those eyes found Lydia the moment she entered. Ethan watched Hale's expression shift, possession, anger, something uglier underneath. Hale half rose from his seat, but one of his lawyers pulled him back down, whispering urgently. Lydia didn't look at him, kept her gaze straight ahead as Walsh guided her to their table, but Ethan saw her hands trembling. He took the seat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "You're not alone," he murmured. "I know," her voice barely carried, "but it doesn't make him less terrifying." The bailiff called for order. Judge Morrison entered, an older man, severe, with a reputation for fairness that Ethan desperately hoped was earned. Morrison surveyed the packed courtroom with obvious disapproval. "This is a civil hearing, not a circus," he announced. "Anyone who cannot conduct themselves appropriately will be removed. Are we clear?" Murmurs of assent. Morrison settled into his chair, adjusted his spectacles, and reviewed the papers before him. "We're here regarding Hale versus Cross. Mr. Brennan, you're representing the plaintiff?" Harold Brennan stood, smooth and confident. "Yes, Your Honor, along with my colleagues, Mr. Danforth and Mr. Price." "And the defense?" Rebecca Walsh rose. "Rebecca Walsh, Your Honor, representing Mr. Ethan Cross." Morrison's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Miss Walsh, I've read about your work. You're a long way from Cheyenne." "Justice doesn't recognize distance, Your Honor." A ghost of a smile touched Morrison's face. "Indeed. Very well. Mr. Brennan, present your case." What followed was a masterclass in legal manipulation. Brennan painted a picture of concerned family, of a mentally unstable woman who'd fled into danger, of Jonathan Hale's desperate attempts to find his beloved wife before tragedy struck. He produced documents, physicians' reports declaring Lydia prone to hysteria and delusion, statements from servants about her erratic behavior, testimony from a minister about her refusal to perform wifely duties. Each piece of evidence felt like a knife, carefully placed to create a specific image. Then Brennan turned his attention to Ethan. Mr. Cross, by his own admission, harbored Mrs. Hale for weeks, prevented her lawful return to her husband, influenced her against her family's counsel. Brennan's voice dripped with implication. One must ask, what were his motivations? A widower, alone with 2 children, taking in a young married woman. The situation suggests impropriety at best, deliberate interference at worst. Several people in the gallery muttered agreement. Ethan felt heat creep up his neck, forced himself to remain still. Furthermore, Brennan continued, Mr. Cross has demonstrated clear disregard for legal authority. When Marshal Davies attempted to verify Mrs. Hale's whereabouts, Mr. Cross obstructed the investigation. When I personally offered reasonable compensation for her safe return, he refused. These are not the actions of an innocent man concerned about a stranger's welfare. These are the actions of someone with ulterior motives. Walsh stood. Objection. Counsel is speculating about my client's motivations without evidence. Sustained, Morrison said. Stick to facts, Mr. Brennan. Of course, Your Honor. Brennan didn't look chastened. The facts are these. Mrs. Lydia Hale is a married woman. Her husband has legal rights and responsibilities regarding her welfare. Mr. Cross knowingly interfered with those rights. The law is clear on this matter. We're seeking damages for that interference, as well as a court order for Mrs. Hale's immediate return to her lawful husband's custody. He sat down, satisfied. His case had been clinical, methodical, built on a framework of law that didn't care about bruises or fear or desperate flights through blizzards. Morrison looked to Walsh. Your response? Walsh stood, and Ethan could see her shift, the way a fighter shifts weight before throwing a punch. Your Honor, the plaintiff's case rests on a fundamental misunderstanding of both law and humanity. Mrs. Hale is not property. She is a human being with rights, agency, and the capacity to make her own choices. The fact that she is married does not strip her of personhood. Ms. Walsh, Morrison interrupted, while I appreciate your passion for women's rights, this court operates under existing law. An existing law does grant husbands certain legal standing regarding their wives. Existing law also prohibits assault, Your Honor. It prohibits false imprisonment. It recognizes the right of individuals to seek safety from harm. Those laws supersede marital rights. You're claiming abuse? I'm not claiming it, Your Honor. I'm going to prove it. A ripple went through the courtroom. Jonathan Hale's face darkened. His lawyers exchanged glances. Morrison leaned forward. That's a serious allegation, Ms. Walsh. And I have serious evidence, Your Honor. If I may call my first witness? Proceed. Walsh called Lydia to the stand. The walk from the defense table to the witness chair felt like miles. Lydia's legs shook, but she made it, sat down, placed her hand on the Bible for the oath. Her voice barely carried as she swore to tell the truth. Walsh started gentle. Basic questions: name, age, background, letting Lydia find her footing. Then, gradually, she moved deeper. Mrs. Hale, when did you marry Jonathan Hale? Last September, September 15th. Was this marriage your choice? Lydia's eyes flickered toward her husband. No. Can you explain? My father had gambling debts, significant debts to the Hale family. Jonathan offered to forgive those debts in exchange for my hand in marriage. My father accepted without consulting me. Did you protest? Yes. But my father said I had no choice, that refusing would destroy our family. So you married Mr. Hale under duress. Objection, Brennan called, leading the witness. Sustained. Rephrase, Ms. Walsh. What was your state of mind on your wedding day? Lydia took a shaky breath. I was terrified. I barely knew Jonathan. What I did know frightened me, but I hoped that maybe it would be tolerable, that maybe I could find a way to make it work. And did you find a way? No? Why not? Silence. Lydia's hands gripped the armrests of the witness chair. In the gallery, Ethan could feel the collective lean forward, everyone straining to hear. Mrs. Hale, Walsh prompted gently, why couldn't you make the marriage work? Because he hurt me. The words came out barely above a whisper. From the first week, he hurt me. Can you be more specific? Objection! Brennan was on his feet. Your Honor, these allegations are unsubstantiated and inflammatory. They're directly relevant to why Mrs. Hale fled, Walsh countered. The defense has the right to establish motive. Morrison considered. I'll allow it, but Miss Walsh, keep it factual. No theatrics. Yes, Your Honor. Walsh turned back to Lydia. You said Mr. Hale hurt you. How? Lydia closed her eyes. The first time was 3 days after the wedding. I asked if I could write to my sister in Denver. He said no. I asked why. He struck me across the face. Several people in this gallery gasped. Jonathan Hale's face had gone stone cold. Did this happen again? Walsh asked. Yes. Many times. If I questioned him, if I didn't move fast enough, if dinner wasn't to his liking. There was always a reason. Did anyone see these incidents? The servants. But they were instructed not to interfere. Jonathan made it clear their positions depended on their silence. Were you ever injured seriously enough to require medical attention? Lydia nodded. Once. He pushed me down the stairs. I broke 2 ribs and fractured my wrist. What did the doctor say? Jonathan told him I'd fallen. The doctor accepted that explanation. Did you tell the doctor the truth? I tried. Jonathan stayed in the room the entire examination. I couldn't speak freely. Walsh walked to her table, retrieved a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence the medical report from that incident, dated November 20th. You'll note the physician documented extensive bruising inconsistent with a simple fall. Morrison accepted the document, studied it. His expression gave nothing away. Walsh continued her examination, pulling out each detail, each incident, building a picture of systematic abuse and control. Lydia's voice grew steadier as she spoke, like telling the truth was its own kind of liberation. Finally, Walsh reached the crucial question. Mrs. Hale, why did you run? Because I knew if I stayed, he would eventually kill me. No hesitation. Maybe not intentionally, maybe in another fit of rage. But I would die in that house. So I chose to risk dying in the storm instead. At least that death would be my choice. And when Mr. Cross found you, when he brought you to his home, did he ever behave inappropriately toward you? Never. He treated me with nothing but respect and kindness. Did he ever prevent you from leaving? No. He offered to help me reach the train depot once I was well enough. The choice to stay was mine. Why did you stay? Lydia looked directly at Ethan. Because for the first time in months, I felt safe. Because his children needed help, and helping them helped me heal. Because... She paused. Because I realized running away wasn't enough. I needed to stand and fight. Walsh let that statement hang in the air, Then she returned to her seat. No further questions, Your Honor. Morrison looked to Brennan. Your witness. Brennan approached the stand like a predator circling prey. Mrs. Hale, you've made serious accusations against my client. They're not accusations, they're facts. Facts. I see. Facts that you never reported to law enforcement. Facts that you never documented. Facts that you expect this court to simply accept on your word alone. I had no one to report to. Your client owns the marshal, the judge, half the speculation, Brennan cut her off. You're speculating about corruption you can't prove. Let me ask you this. Did you ever attempt to leave before the blizzard? No, but yes or no, Mrs. Hale? No. So for 6 months, you remained in the marriage, lived in comfort, enjoyed the benefits of the Hale name and wealth. Only when you were asked to fulfill your wifely duties did you suddenly decide to flee. That's not what happened. Did you or did you not refuse to consummate your marriage? Lydia's face flushed. Yes, I couldn't. A simple yes or no? Yes. And isn't it true that Mr. Hale, frustrated but patient, arranged for you to see physicians about this reluctance? He arranged for me to see doctors who declared me hysterical without proper examination, doctors with impeccable credentials, doctors whose reports I've submitted to this court, doctors who all agreed you were suffering from nervous instability and delusions. Walsh stood. Objection. Those physicians were paid by the Hale family and never conducted independent examinations. The reports are certified and signed, Brennan countered. Unless Ms. Walsh can prove these doctors committed fraud, which is itself a serious allegation, their professional opinions stand. Morrison nodded. Overruled. Continue, Mr. Brennan. Brennan smiled. Mrs. Hale, isn't it possible that your perception of events has been colored by your documented mental instability? That what you interpret as abuse was actually your husband's justified frustration with a wife who refused her duties? No. Lydia's voice shook but held firm. I know what I experienced. I know the difference between frustration and violence. Do you? Because according to these reports, you have difficulty distinguishing reality from imagination. You suffer from delusions, paranoia, hysterical episodes. In fact, one doctor noted you claimed your husband was trying to poison you, a claim that was thoroughly investigated and disproven. Lydia went pale. I was sick. I thought I was confused. Exactly. Confused, delusional, unable to accurately perceive your own situation. Which brings us to Mr. Cross. Brennan turned, gestured toward Ethan. A widower takes in a confused, vulnerable woman, keeps her isolated on his ranch, refuses to return her to her lawful family. Tell me, Mrs. Hale, did Mr. Cross ever suggest that your husband was a bad man? He didn't need to suggest it. I told him, did he encourage your fears, reinforce your delusions, perhaps even suggest that you had a future with him? Objection! Walsh was on her feet again. Counsel is badgering the witness with compound questions and unsupported insinuations. Your Honor, Brennan said smoothly, I'm simply exploring whether Mr. Cross deliberately manipulated a mentally unstable woman for his own purposes. Which is speculation without foundation, Walsh shot back. Morrison held up a hand. Both of you, approach the bench. The lawyers moved forward, voices dropping to heated whispers Ethan couldn't hear. He watched Lydia on the stand, saw her struggling to hold herself together. Jonathan Hale watched her too, his expression unreadable. Finally, Morrison waved the lawyers back. Mr. Brennan, you've made your point. Move on. Of course, Your Honor. Brennan returned to the stand. Mrs. Hale, one final question. If Mr. Cross is as noble as you claim, why hasn't he returned you to your family and allowed the courts to properly investigate your allegations? Lydia met his gaze. Because he knows what I know. That the courts, the law, the entire system is built to protect men like Jonathan and punish women like me. That my only chance at safety is to disappear, not to fight. But Mr. Cross believed we could fight anyway. That truth mattered more than power. Noble sentiments, naive, but noble. Brennan's smile was cold. No further questions. Lydia left the stand on shaking legs. Ethan wanted to go to her, but Walsh was already calling her next witness, the physician who'd treated Lydia's broken ribs. Dr. Marcus Chen was Mrs. Chen's husband, a careful man who chose his words precisely. He confirmed treating Lydia, confirmed the injuries were severe, confirmed his notes indicated bruising patterns inconsistent with stated cause of accident. "Did you report your suspicions?" Walsh asked. "I mentioned them to Mr. Hale. He assured me his wife was clumsy, prone to accidents." "Did you believe him?" Dr. Chen hesitated. "I documented what I saw. I cannot say what I believed. It was something. Not much, but something." Brennan's cross-examination was brief and brutal. He got Dr. Chen to admit he'd seen Lydia only once, that he had no direct knowledge of abuse, that medical evidence alone couldn't prove intent. The morning dragged on. Walsh called 2 former Hale servants who testified via written affidavit. Both had left the Hale employment and were willing to state they'd witnessed Jonathan strike Lydia on multiple occasions. Brennan objected to the affidavits as hearsay, but Morrison allowed them with noted reservations. Then came the lunch recess. Ethan found Lydia in the small room Walsh had secured for private conferences. She stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself. "You did well," he said quietly. "I fell apart. Let him twist everything. You told the truth. That's what matters." She laughed, hollow. "The truth doesn't matter. You see that now, don't you? They've already decided. The judge, the jury of public opinion, all of them. Women who leave their husbands are either crazy or wicked. There's no third option." Ethan crossed to her, gently turned her to face him. "Then we make a third option. We keep fighting until they have to see you as human, not a category." "You're an optimist." "I'm stubborn. There's a difference." She managed a weak smile. "I'm going to lose you everything. Your ranch, your children's security, all of it. My children's security comes from knowing their father did what was right. Everything else is just things. Just things, spoken like someone who's never had nothing. I had nothing when Anna died. Had less than nothing. I had grief and 2 terrified kids and no idea how to keep going. But I did keep going, and I'll keep going after this, whatever happens." Lydia's eyes filled. "How are you so certain?" "Because the alternative is giving up, and I'm too stubborn for that." She leaned forward, rested her forehead against his chest. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, held her while she trembled. Through the wall they could hear voices in the courtroom, the low rumble of people discussing the morning's testimony. "They think I seduced you," Lydia whispered, "that I'm some kind of temptress who corrupted a grieving widower." "Let them think what they want. Don't you care what people say?" Ethan thought about it. A month ago, he would have cared desperately, would have needed the town's approval, their acceptance. But something had changed. Standing here, holding this brave, broken woman who'd chosen survival over safety, he realized their opinions had stopped mattering. "No," he said, "I don't care. The only opinions that matter are the ones from people who know the truth." Walsh knocked and entered without waiting. 5 minutes. "Ethan, you're up next." His stomach dropped. "Already?" "Brennan's rushing through, wants to finish today if possible, probably hoping to catch us off balance." She fixed him with a sharp look. "Remember what we practiced. Short answers, no editorializing, and for heaven's sake, don't let him provoke you into losing your temper." "I'll try. Try harder. Jonathan Hale hasn't testified yet. Brennan's saving him for dramatic effect, the wronged husband, desperate for his wife's return. You need to establish the baseline before that performance." Lydia pulled away from Ethan, wiped her eyes. "Be careful. Brennan will try to make you look like a predator." "I know. And Jonathan, when he testifies, he'll be convincing. He's always convincing." "I know that too." She gripped his hand. "Thank you. For all of this. For standing when anyone sensible would have run." "Sensible is overrated." Walsh cleared her throat. "Touching, but we're out of time. Let's go." The afternoon session started with Ethan in the witness chair. He felt exposed, every eye in the courtroom tracking his movements. Walsh led him through the basics: his name, his ranch, his children, how long he'd lived in the area, establishing him as a known quantity, a neighbor, a father. Then she moved to that night. "Mr. Cross, tell the court what happened on February 8th. Ethan described finding Lydia, the decision to bring her inside, the 3 days of fever and recovery. Walsh walked him through each detail, each choice. "Did you know who she was when you found her?" "No, just that she was dying." "Did you consider leaving her there?" Brutal honesty seemed the only option. "Yes." For about 5 seconds. Then I picked her up and brought her home. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. Even though she was a stranger, even though bringing her inside might bring complications? Even though, Walsh paused, let that settle. When did you learn she was fleeing her husband? The second day, when she woke up. What did she tell you? That she was running from a man who hurt her, that people would come looking, that helping her would put me in danger. And knowing that, you still chose to let her stay? Yes. Why? Ethan looked at Lydia. She sat at the defense table, her hands clasped, her eyes locked on his. Because by then I'd seen the bruises, the fear, the way she flinched at sudden movements, and I knew if I sent her back, I'd be sending her to more of the same. I couldn't do it, wouldn't do it. Did you have romantic intentions toward Mrs. Hale? No, not then. A ripple through the courtroom. Walsh didn't react. Not then. What about later? Ethan took a breath. Later, I came to care about her, to respect her strength, her courage, to appreciate who she was as a person. Whether that's romantic or not, I can't say. But it wasn't why I helped her. I helped her because she needed help. Did you ever behave inappropriately toward her? No. Did you prevent her from leaving? No. I offered multiple times to help her reach the train depot. She chose to stay. Why do you think she made that choice? Objection? Brennan called. Calls for speculation. Withdrawn. Walsh consulted her notes. Mr. Cross, when Marshal Davies came to your property, why did you refuse to cooperate? Because I knew what cooperation meant. Handing Lydia back to a man who'd hurt her. I couldn't do that in good conscience. Even knowing the legal consequences? Even knowing. Walsh returned to her seat. Your witness, Mr. Brennan. Here it came. Ethan braced himself. Brennan stood slowly, theatrically. Mr. Cross, you're a widower, correct? Yes. Your wife passed away last year. Cancer, I believe. That's right. That must have been very difficult, lonely even. Ethan saw the trap forming. It was difficult. Not sure lonely is the word. No? A man alone with 2 young children, isolated on a ranch miles from town? That doesn't feel lonely? Sometimes. So when this attractive young woman appeared, vulnerable and grateful, that must have been appealing. Objection. Walsh was on her feet. Counsel's implying facts, not in evidence. I'm simply exploring Mr. Cross's state of mind, Your Honor. Then do so without the editorializing, Morrison said. Sustained. Brennan shifted tactics. Mr. Cross, you claim you helped Mrs. Hale out of pure altruism, yet you refused multiple opportunities to return her to her lawful family. Why? Because she didn't want to go back. She's a married woman. Her wants are subordinate to her husband's legal rights. Not when her husband is hurting her. Alleged hurting, Mr. Cross. You have no direct knowledge of abuse. Only Mrs. Hale's word, a woman multiple physicians have declared mentally unstable. I saw the bruises. Old bruises can come from many sources. Falls, accidents, clumsiness. I saw the fear. Fear is subjective, easily manufactured by someone with something to gain. Ethan's temper flared. What exactly do you think she has to gain? Being dragged through this courtroom? Having her character destroyed? Facing the man who terrorized her? Perhaps the sympathy of a lonely widower. Perhaps a new home, new security. Perhaps freedom from wifely duties she found distasteful. That's not, Mr. Cross, isn't it true that you've been seen in town with Mrs. Hale? That you've presented her as part of your household? That your own children call her by her first name? Yes, but yes or no answers, please. Have you developed feelings for Mrs. Hale? Ethan met his gaze. Yes. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Morrison banged his gavel for silence. Brennan smiled. Thank you for your honesty. So we have a lonely widower who admits to romantic feelings for another man's wife. A man who refused legal orders to return said wife. A man who, by his own admission, allowed his emotions to override law and propriety. Tell me, Mr. Cross, how is that not interference with a marriage? Because marriage isn't ownership. Because a woman has the right to escape violence. Because the law is supposed to protect people, not trap them. The law protects marital contracts, Mr. Cross. Contracts that Mrs. Hale entered willingly, under duress. and which she now seeks to break through fabricated claims of abuse, aided by a man who admits he has feelings for her. The coincidence is remarkable, don't you think? Objection! Walsh again. Your Honor, Mr. Brennan is testifying rather than questioning. Sustained. Mr. Brennan, ask questions or sit down. Brennan wasn't done. One final question, Mr. Cross? If the court orders Mrs. Hale returned to her husband, will you comply? Ethan looked at Lydia, at Jonathan Hale, at Judge Morrison. No, he said quietly. I won't. The courtroom exploded. Morrison's gavel came down hard, repeatedly, barely restoring order. When the room finally quieted, the judge's face was stern. Mr. Cross, you understand you've just stated your intention to defy a court order? Yes, Your Honor, I understand. And you're willing to accept the consequences of that defiance? Ethan thought of Sarah and Michael, of the ranch, of everything he stood to lose. Then he looked at Lydia's face, at the hope and terror there, and knew he couldn't choose differently. Yes, Your Honor, I am. Morrison studied him for a long moment. Step down, Mr. Cross. Ethan returned to the defense table on unsteady legs. Walsh looked like she wanted to strangle him. We'll discuss that later, she hissed. The final witness was Jonathan Hale himself. He took the stand with confidence, settled into the chair like he owned it. Brennan guided him through a performance that was almost beautiful in its construction. The concerned husband, the patient man driven to extremes by his wife's instability, the victim of circumstances beyond his control. I love Lydia, he said, his voice carrying perfectly. I've tried everything to help her, the best doctors, the finest care. But her illness, it's beyond my ability to manage alone. That's why I sought legal assistance. Not to punish, but to protect. Has she ever made these accusations of abuse before? Brennan asked. Yes, to her physicians, to me, to servants. It's part of her delusion. She imagines persecution where none exists. How do you explain her injuries? Lydia is clumsy. Always has been. She falls frequently, refuses to take proper care. I've spent countless hours trying to protect her from herself. And Mr. Cross, what do you make of his involvement? Jonathan's expression hardened. I believe he took advantage of a vulnerable woman, filled her head with ideas of escape and independence, likely for his own purposes. Do you still want your wife returned? Of course. She's ill. She needs treatment, not encouragement in her fantasies. It was perfect. Every word calculated. Every gesture designed to convey hurt and concern. Ethan watched the gallery, saw heads nodding, saw sympathy forming. Then Walsh stood for cross-examination. Mr. Hale, you've painted a picture of a caring husband. Let me ask you this. In the 6 months of your marriage, how many times did you strike your wife? Jonathan didn't flinch. Never. I've never struck Lydia. Never? Never. Not even when she refused your advances? She never refused. She's my wife. Not even when she questioned your decisions? I welcome my wife's input when it's coherent. Walsh walked to her table, retrieved a document. I have here an affidavit from Margaret Shale, formerly employed in your household. She states she personally witnessed you strike Mrs. Hale on at least 6 occasions. Margaret was dismissed for theft. I wouldn't credit her testimony. And Thomas Wright, your former groundskeeper, he corroborates the same incidents. Thomas left under unfortunate circumstances. He had reason to manufacture complaints. How convenient that every witness against you is discredited. Walsh's voice was sharp. Mr. Hale, isn't it true that you have a pattern of settling legal complaints quietly? That you've paid off at least 3 women in the past 5 years? Brennan shot to his feet. Objection. Irrelevant and unsubstantiated. It goes to character, Your Honor. You'll need to establish relevance, Morrison said. Walsh nodded. Mr. Hale, in 1873, didn't you pay $1,500 to a Miss Clara Jennings after an incident at your property? Jonathan's face remained calm. A business dispute, amicably resolved. A business dispute with a 19-year-old shopkeeper's daughter? The nature of the dispute is confidential, as was your settlement with Elizabeth Hartford in 1874 and Sarah Chen in 1875. Business matters, all of them. 3 young women, 3 quiet settlements, 3 confidentiality agreements. That's quite a pattern, Mr. Hale. His jaw tightened, just slightly. I run multiple business interests, Ms. Walsh. Disputes happen. I prefer to resolve them quietly rather than air every grievance publicly. That's called discretion, not guilt. Walsh changed direction. You testified that you love your wife. Yet when she disappeared during a deadly blizzard, you waited 3 days before beginning a search. Why? I was told the storm made searching impossible. Marshal Davies was riding that third day. You could have started earlier. I relied on professional judgment. Or you weren't particularly concerned whether she lived or died. Objection, Brennan thundered. Withdrawn. Walsh circled back. Mr. Hale, if your wife is returned to you, what happens? She receives the care she needs. Meaning, treatment, proper supervision, whatever the physicians recommend. Including institutionalization? Jonathan hesitated. First genuine pause. If necessary. Necessary, Walsh repeated. So your plan is to lock your wife away in an asylum? My plan is to ensure she receives appropriate medical care for her condition, a condition diagnosed by doctors you employed, based on criteria you provided. How wonderfully convenient. I've done everything legally. Legally, yes. Morally, that's debatable. No further questions. The hearing adjourned at 5 o'clock. Morrison announced he'd issue a ruling within 3 days. 3 days to wait. 3 days to wonder. 3 days to prepare for the end. Ethan collected Sarah and Michael from Mrs. Chen's, listening to them chatter about their day without really hearing. His mind kept circling back to that courtroom, to Lydia's testimony, to his own admission of defiance. They drove home in silence, broken only by the children's voices. As the ranch came into view, the small house, the weathered barn, the fields he'd worked for 3 years, Ethan felt the weight of potential loss settle over him. This might not be theirs much longer. Lydia was waiting on the porch when they arrived. She'd ridden back with Walsh, who'd left immediately to prepare additional motions, desperate last-ditch efforts to sway Morrison's decision. "How are you?" Lydia asked as the children ran inside. "Honestly? Terrified." "Me too." They stood together in the fading light, watching the sun set over land that might soon belong to someone else. "I'm sorry," Lydia whispered, "for all of this." "Don't be. But your ranch, your children, are learning what it means to stand for something that's worth more than land." "Is it? Is it really?" Ethan didn't have an answer. Couldn't promise her that nobility paid the bills or that virtue protected children from hardship. All he could offer was the truth. "I don't know," he said, "but it's all I have to give." Lydia leaned against him, and together they watched the darkness fall. 3 days until the ruling. 3 days until everything changed. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And somehow, that made the waiting almost bearable. The letter arrived on the second day of waiting. Ethan found it tucked under a rock on his porch. No envelope, no postmark, just folded paper weighted down against the morning wind. His name was written across it in Lydia's precise handwriting. His stomach dropped. He looked toward the house, saw the kitchen window dark, too early for anyone to be awake. He unfolded the paper with hands that trembled. "Ethan, I can't let you lose everything because of me. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't look for me. Don't follow. This is my choice, my fight. Tell Sarah and Michael I'm sorry. Tell them I loved being part of your family, even briefly. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, hope. Now I'm giving you back your life. Take care of them. Take care of yourself. And maybe, someday, think of me kindly. L." He read it twice, 3 times. Then he was moving, running to the barn where Lydia had been sleeping since the hearing. The door stood open. Her few belongings were gone. The blankets on her makeshift bed were folded neatly, like she'd never been there at all. "No." The word came out strangled. "No, no, no." He checked the horse stalls. The old mare was missing, along with a saddle and provisions. She'd planned this carefully, waited until everyone slept, then disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. Protecting him. Sacrificing herself to save his ranch, his children, his future. The stubborn, selfless, impossible woman. Ethan's first instinct was to saddle another horse and chase her down. But Lydia had hours of head start. and he had no idea which direction she'd taken. The train depot? The mountains? Some hiding place she'd planned in advance? He stood in the barn, clutching her letter, feeling the weight of her choice settle over him like stones. She was giving him an out. A way to tell Morrison that she'd fled, that he couldn't return her even if he wanted to, that the whole matter was now moot. The judge might still fine him, might still express displeasure, but without Lydia present, the case would collapse. Jonathan would have no one to reclaim. Ethan would keep his land. All he had to do was nothing. Just let her go. Let her disappear into whatever uncertain future she'd chosen. The safe choice. The sensible choice. Ethan crumpled the letter in his fist. Then he went to wake his children. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Papa, what's wrong?" "Lydia's gone." Her face went from sleepy to stricken in an instant. "Gone where?" "I don't know. She left during the night." "Why would she leave?" Ethan showed her the letter. Sarah read it, her expression growing more distressed with each line. When she finished, she looked up at him with those two perceptive eyes. "She thinks she's protecting us." "I know. But she's wrong. We're supposed to protect each other. That's what family does." The word hit him hard. Family. When had Lydia become family? When had this stranger he'd found in a blizzard transformed into someone his children couldn't imagine living without? He didn't know the exact moment, just knew it was true. "What are we going to do?" Sarah asked. "Find her. Bring her back." "And then what? The judge still makes his ruling tomorrow. Even if we find her, even if she comes back, we might lose the ranch anyway." "Then we lose it, but we lose it fighting, not running." Michael stumbled into the kitchen, drawn by their voices. "What's happening?" Sarah showed him the letter. Michael's face crumpled. "Lydia left?" "She's trying to help," Ethan said, in her own misguided way. "But we need her here. She makes the good pancakes." Despite everything, Ethan smiled. "She does make good pancakes." "So we're going to find her?" "We are. But first I need to visit someone." Mrs. Chen opened her door at Ethan's knock, took one look at his face, and ushered him inside without questions. Her husband sat at the breakfast table reading a newspaper. Both of them listened as Ethan explained what had happened. "She ran," Mrs. Chen said when he finished. Not a question. "To protect us." "Foolish girl." "Brave girl," Dr. Chen corrected. "Foolish and brave often look the same." "I need to find her before she gets too far," Ethan said. "But I can't take the children, not if I'm riding hard, and I can't leave them alone with—" He gestured vaguely, meaning everything. The uncertainty, the danger, the possibility that Jonathan Hale might decide to retaliate. "They stay here," Mrs. Chen said immediately, "for as long as needed." "I don't know how long, however long, we'll keep them safe." Dr. Chen folded his newspaper. "Ethan, may I speak frankly?" "Please." "You're riding after a woman who doesn't want to be found, to bring her back to a situation that might destroy you both. The sensible thing would be to let her go. Appear in court tomorrow, tell Morrison she fled, accept whatever minimal consequences he imposes, and rebuild your life." "I know." "So why aren't you doing the sensible thing?" Ethan thought about it. About Anna, who taught him that some things mattered more than safety. About Sarah and Michael, who needed to see their father stand for something. About Lydia, who'd survived so much only to sacrifice herself for people who'd become family. "Because sensible isn't always right," he said finally, "and I'm tired of choosing safe over right." Dr. Chen smiled. "Good. Then you'll need supplies." He stood, moved to a cabinet, began pulling out items. "Food, water, medical kit, take them. And Ethan? When you find her, tell her we testified at that hearing because we believe her. Tell her this town isn't all corrupt judges and bought lawmen. Some of us still care about truth." The words hit harder than Ethan expected. He'd been so focused on the opposition, on Brennan and Jonathan and the system arrayed against them, that he'd forgotten the people who'd stood up, the quiet acts of courage that hadn't made headlines. "Thank you," he managed. Mrs. Chen pressed food into his hands. "Find her quickly and bring her home." Home. The word carried weight, promise, hope. Ethan kissed his children goodbye, promised to return soon, and rode out as the sun cleared the horizon. He checked the train depot first. The station master remembered Lydia. Hard not to remember a woman traveling alone, visibly afraid, buying a ticket with trembling hands. She'd boarded the morning train to Cheyenne, he said, left maybe 30 minutes ago. Ethan could follow, could take the next train, could track her to Cheyenne and beyond. But something felt wrong. Lydia was smart, careful. Would she really take the obvious route? Or would she use it as misdirection? He stood on the platform thinking, where would someone go if they wanted to disappear? Not the city. Too many questions. Too much documentation. Somewhere remote. Somewhere she could vanish. The mountains. The high country where settlers rarely went. Where a person could lose themselves in wilderness. Ethan turned his horse north. The trail led up through pine forest, climbing steadily into terrain that grew rougher with each mile. He found signs. A hoofprint in soft earth, a broken branch at horse height, places where someone had stopped to rest. Lydia was ahead of him, maybe 2 hours now instead of 3. He was gaining. By midday, he spotted her. She sat on a fallen log beside the trail, the old mare grazing nearby. Her shoulders were slumped, her head down. She looked exhausted, defeated, like the weight of everything had finally broken through her determination. Ethan dismounted quietly, approached on foot. She must have heard him, but didn't look up. "You're supposed to be at the ranch," she said without turning, "protecting your children, saving your land. My children are safe with the Chens, and the land can go to hell." "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true." He circled around to face her. "Did you really think I'd just let you disappear? That I'd read your noble sacrifice letter and think, well, that's that? I hoped you'd be sensible. I'm done being sensible. Sensible has gotten me nowhere." Lydia finally looked up. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy from crying. "Ethan, I can't let you lose everything for me. I can't be that person, that burden. You're not a burden, you're family." "I'm not family. I'm a stranger you pulled from a snowbank. Who became family? Who my children love, who I—" He stopped, swallowed the rest. "Who you what?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Ethan crouched down to her level, took her hands in his. "Who I care about more than I have any right to. Who's made me remember what it feels like to hope for something beyond just surviving each day. Who's shown my children what courage looks like when it's tested by impossible choices." Tears spilled down Lydia's cheeks. "You're going to lose your ranch." "Maybe. Probably. But I'll lose something worse if I let you go. I'll lose the part of me that finally woke up after a year of sleepwalking. I'll lose the belief that fighting for what's right actually means something. What if fighting isn't enough? What if we lose anyway? Then we lose together, and we figure out what comes next together. But Lydia," he cupped her face, made her meet his eyes, "I'm not letting you face this alone. Not anymore." She broke then, collapsed forward into his arms, sobbing against his chest while he held her. All the fear, all the desperation, all the weight she'd been carrying alone poured out in ragged gasps and trembling shoulders. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being scared." "I know, me too. How do we do this? How do we stand against all of it? Same way we've done everything else. One step at a time, one choice at a time, starting with going back." She pulled away, wiped her face roughly. "Going back to what? Morrison's ruling? Jonathan's lawyers? All of it? Going back to fight. Really fight. Not just defend. We're done playing their game by their rules." "What does that mean?" Ethan stood, helped her to her feet. "It means we stop reacting and start acting. It means we find every piece of evidence, every witness, every crack in Jonathan's armor, and we exploit it. It means we make noise, make trouble, make it impossible for them to sweep this under the rug quietly. The ruling comes tomorrow. Then we have tonight. And Rebecca Walsh strikes me as someone who knows how to work fast when she needs to." Lydia studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found there made her straighten, made some of the defeat leave her posture. "Okay," she said. "Okay. We go back. We fight." "Together?" She managed a small smile. "Together." They rode back to town as the sun climbed toward noon, pushing the horses harder than wise, but driven by the knowledge that time was running out. When they reached Frost Creek, Ethan went straight to the boarding house where Walsh was staying. The lawyer opened her door looking like she hadn't slept. Papers covered every surface of her room, law books lay open, and 3 empty coffee cups sat on her desk. "You found her," Walsh said, seeing Lydia behind Ethan. "She tried to run. We convinced her otherwise." "Good. Because I've been doing research all night, and I think I found something." Walsh gestured them inside, cleared space for them to sit. "Jonathan Hale's marriage to you, it's not his first." Lydia went very still. "What?" "He was married before 5 years ago, to a woman named Catherine Reeves. The marriage lasted 8 months, then she died. Official cause listed as accidental fall." The words hung in the air like poison. "Another fall," Lydia breathed. "Just like me. Just like you. I found the death certificate, the coroner's report, everything. Catherine's family contested the findings, claimed she'd written them letters about Jonathan's violence, but their complaint went nowhere. They didn't have resources, didn't have connections. The matter was closed quietly." Ethan felt ice in his veins. "He killed her. I can't prove that, but the pattern is damning. And here's the thing, Catherine's family still lives in the territory. Her brother specifically. I sent him a telegram this morning, explained our situation. He's willing to testify." "To what?" Lydia asked. "He doesn't know me, doesn't know what happened with Jonathan and me." "No. But he can testify about Catherine, about the letters she sent describing escalating violence, about the suspicious circumstances of her death, about how Jonathan's lawyers and money made the investigation disappear." Walsh's expression was fierce. "We can't prove Jonathan killed his first wife, but we can create reasonable doubt about his character, make the court question his version of events." "Morrison already ruled mentally," Ethan said. "Verbally, I mean. He's sympathetic to Jonathan's position. He was sympathetic before he knew there was a pattern, before he understood this wasn't about one unstable woman, but potentially 2 dead or damaged women. That changes the calculation." Lydia shook her head. "Even if Catherine's brother testifies, even if we cast doubt on Jonathan's character, the law is still on his side. I'm still legally his wife. The court still has authority to return me to him." "Unless you're not his wife," Walsh said quietly. Silence. Then Lydia leaned forward. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if the first marriage was never properly dissolved, if Catherine Reeves was never properly declared dead through appropriate channels, then Jonathan's marriage to you might be invalid. He can't be married to 2 people simultaneously." "But Catherine is dead. The death certificate was filed in a county where Jonathan's family has influence, was signed by a coroner who's taken money from the Hales for years, was accepted without independent verification." Walsh pulled out a document. "I had a colleague in the Territorial Records Office do some digging. The original death certificate has irregularities, wrong dates, missing signatures, questionable witnesses. It might not hold up under scrutiny." Ethan felt hope spark, dangerous and bright. If the first marriage wasn't properly dissolved, then Lydia's marriage is void. "Exactly, which means Jonathan has no legal claim on her, no marital rights to enforce. The entire case collapses." "Can we prove it?" Lydia asked. "Can we prove the irregularities in time?" Walsh smiled, sharp and determined. "We're going to try. Catherine's brother is on a train right now, bringing documents. Original letters from Catherine, family records, everything he's kept for 5 years waiting for someone to finally care. He'll be here by evening." "The ruling comes tomorrow morning," Ethan said. "Then we work through the night. Again." Walsh stood, energy crackling around her. "This is the fight I've been training for my entire career. Exposing corruption, challenging power, proving that the law can work for the powerless if someone's willing to fight hard enough. I'm not letting this opportunity pass." Lydia stood too, something shifting in her expression. The fear was still there, but beneath it, Ethan saw steel forming. "What do you need from me?" "Everything. Every detail about your marriage, your wedding, the circumstances. Every conversation, every document, every moment that might help us prove Jonathan rushed into this marriage illegally." "He did rush it. My father signed the agreement in March. We were married by September. Jonathan said he wanted it done quickly, before I could complicate things with female emotions." Lydia's voice was bitter. "I thought he was just eager. Now I wonder if he was hiding something." "He was," Walsh said with certainty. "Men like Jonathan always are. We just need to prove it." They worked through the afternoon and into evening. Walsh interviewed Lydia for hours, taking notes, cross-referencing statements, building a timeline. Ethan rode back to the Chens to check on his children and found them being fed cookies and taught how to play chess by Dr. Chen. Found her? Mrs. Chen asked. Found her. She's back. And we're fighting. Good. She pressed more food into his hands. Then you'll need strength. Eat. Rest if you can. And Ethan, we're proud of you. Both of us. The words shouldn't have mattered as much as they did. But they did. Catherine's brother arrived on the evening train, a thin man in his 40s named Thomas Reeves, carrying a worn leather satchel that held 5 years of grief and unanswered questions. Walsh sat him down in her boarding house room and began extracting his story while Ethan and Lydia listened. Catherine wrote me every week, Thomas said, his voice rough with old pain. At first the letters were normal. Then they changed. She started talking about Jonathan's temper, his need for control. By month 6, she was describing violence. She wanted to leave but was afraid. Did you try to help? Walsh asked gently. I came to visit. Jonathan turned me away at the door, said Catherine was unwell, didn't want visitors. I tried to contact the law, but the marshal said it was a private marital matter. I tried going to their house again, and Jonathan had me escorted off the property. Thomas's hands clenched. 2 weeks later, I got word she was dead. Fell down the stairs, they said. Same stairs she'd walked 1,000 times without incident. Did you contest it? I tried. Filed complaints, demanded an investigation. But the Hales had money, influence. My complaints disappeared. Eventually, I was told to stop making trouble or face legal consequences myself. He looked at Lydia. When Ms. Walsh's telegram arrived, describing your situation, it was like reading Catherine's story again. Same man, same pattern, same lies. Lydia's face had gone pale. I could have been her. You nearly were, Thomas said bluntly. Whatever you did to escape, whatever risks you took, you chose right. Catherine didn't get that chance. Walsh spread documents across her desk. Thomas brought Catherine's letters, the original death certificate, records from the family's attempts to investigate. Combined with Lydia's testimony and the irregularities I've found, we have a case. Maybe not a perfect case, but a case. Will Morrison listen? Ethan asked. He'll have to. I'm filing a motion first thing tomorrow morning before he can issue his ruling. A motion to invalidate Lydia's marriage based on Jonathan's fraudulent representation of his marital status. Morrison is bound by law to consider it. And if he denies the motion, then we appeal. And we keep appealing, keep fighting, keep making noise until someone with authority actually looks at the evidence. Walsh's eyes were fierce. I've built a career on these battles, Ethan. I don't lose them often. The night stretched long as they prepared. Walsh drafted motions, rehearsed questions, built arguments. Thomas shared story after story about Catherine, about the sister he'd lost, about 5 years of waiting for justice. Lydia added her own experiences, her own evidence, her own pain. Ethan watched them work and felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about saving his ranch anymore. It wasn't even just about protecting Lydia. This was about stopping Jonathan Hale from destroying anyone else, about proving that power had limits, about making the system work for the people it was supposed to protect. Near midnight, Walsh finally called a halt. We need rest. A few hours at least. The hearing starts at 9. Thomas excused himself to his own room. Lydia remained sitting by the window, staring out at the dark street. Ethan moved to stand beside her. You should sleep, he said quietly. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see Catherine, see myself becoming her. You're not her. You got out. Barely, and only because you refused to let me give up. She looked at him, her expression raw. What happens tomorrow, Ethan? Really? What's the best outcome we can hope for? Morrison accepts the motion. Invalidates your marriage. Jonathan loses his legal claim. You're free. And the worst outcome? Morrison denies everything, orders you return to Jonathan. We refuse. They arrest me for contempt. Jonathan gets you anyway. That's not acceptable. No. It's not. So what do we do if it goes that way? Ethan had been thinking about this question for days, had played out every scenario, every possibility, and he'd come to a conclusion that was probably insane but felt inevitable. We run, he said. All of us. You, me, Sarah, Michael. We take what we can carry and disappear, start over somewhere the Hale name means nothing. Lydia stared at him. You'd give up everything? Your land, your home? Your entire life here? I already decided the land wasn't worth keeping if it meant sacrificing you. This is just the logical extension. But your children, will adapt, they're strong, and they'll learn that sometimes standing for what's right means starting over. That's not the worst lesson. You'd be a fugitive. They'd come after you. Let them. I'm tired of living in fear of what powerful men might do. Tired of letting that fear control my choices. Lydia turned to face him fully. In the dim lamplight, she looked younger, more vulnerable, and somehow stronger all at once. I don't deserve this. Don't deserve you risking everything. That's not your call to make. Ethan, he took her hands, held them gently. Listen to me. Anna used to say that love wasn't about deserving. It was about choosing. Every day you choose to show up, to care, to stay even when leaving would be easier. I'm choosing, Lydia. I'm choosing you, choosing this fight, choosing to believe that maybe we actually have a chance at something good on the other side. Her breath caught. You said love. I did. Do you mean it? Ethan thought about the question, thought about what love meant after loss, after grief, after rebuilding a shattered life. It didn't look like it had with Anna, that young, untested love that grew slowly over years of partnership. This was different, harder won, forged in crisis and choice rather than comfort, but it was love nonetheless. Yes, he said simply, I mean it. Lydia kissed him. It wasn't dramatic or smooth, their noses bumped, the angle was wrong, they both half laughed at the awkwardness. But then they adjusted and it was right, simple and true and exactly what both of them needed. When they pulled apart, Lydia was crying. I'm still terrified of tomorrow. So am I. What if we lose? Then we figure out the next step, together. She nodded, wiped her eyes, managed a shaky smile. Together. I like the sound of that. They stayed at the window for a long time, watching night give way to the first hints of dawn. The day that would decide everything was coming, inevitable as sunrise. But for now, in this quiet moment before the storm, they had each other. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The courthouse bells rang at 8:30, calling the town to witness. Ethan, Lydia, Walsh, and Thomas climbed the steps together, a small army marching toward uncertain battle. At the top of the stairs, Ethan paused, looked back at the street. Mrs. Chen stood there with Sarah and Michael, all three of them watching. His children waved. Sarah called out, her voice carrying clear across the morning air. Be brave, Papa. Ethan waved back, felt his throat tighten. Then he turned and walked through the courthouse doors. Whatever came next, whatever Morrison decided, whatever Jonathan and his lawyers threw at them, they'd face it standing. No more running, no more hiding, no more letting fear write the story. Today they fought back. And if they went down, they'd go down swinging. The courtroom was even more crowded than before. Word had spread overnight about the new evidence, about Catherine Reeves's brother arriving with documents, about Walsh's emergency motion. People packed the gallery, lined the walls, craned their necks to see. This wasn't just a legal hearing anymore. It was theater, entertainment, the biggest scandal Frost Creek had seen in years. Ethan felt their stares like physical weight. He sat at the defense table between Lydia and Walsh, acutely aware of Jonathan Hale's presence across the aisle. Jonathan looked calm, almost bored, like this was a minor inconvenience rather than a fight for his reputation. That confidence worried Ethan more than anger would have. Judge Morrison entered at 9 sharp, and the bailiff called for order. Morrison surveyed the packed room with obvious displeasure, then settled into his chair with a heavy sigh. Before we proceed to my ruling, he began, I understand Ms. Walsh has filed an emergency motion. Walsh stood. Yes, Your Honor. A motion to invalidate the marriage between Lydia Hale and Jonathan Hale on grounds of fraud and misrepresentation. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Morrison raised his hand for silence. That's a serious allegation, Ms. Walsh. You're claiming the marriage itself is invalid? I am, Your Honor. New evidence has come to light suggesting Mr. Hale was not legally free to marry at the time of his wedding to my client. Brennan shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is a transparent delay tactic. Ms. Walsh knows her case is weak, so she's manufacturing last-minute theatrics. I'm presenting evidence, Mr. Brennan, unless you'd prefer I withhold material facts from the court. The marriage certificate is valid and properly filed. Based on false pretenses. Morrison's gavel came down. Both of you, enough. Ms. Walsh, present your motion. Mr. Brennan, you'll have opportunity to respond. Let's proceed with some semblance of order. Walsh opened her briefcase, pulled out a stack of documents. Your Honor, I'd like to call Thomas Reeves to the stand. Thomas rose, his movements stiff with nerves. He dressed in his best suit, his gray hair neatly combed, his face set with determination. He took the oath with a steady voice. Walsh began gently. Mr. Reeves, can you tell the court about your relationship to this case? My sister Catherine was married to Jonathan Hale 5 years ago. She died 8 months later under suspicious circumstances. The courtroom erupted. Morrison's gavel worked overtime, restoring quiet. When the noise finally subsided, he leaned forward. Mr. Reeves, those are serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support them? I have letters from my sister describing escalating violence. I have the death certificate with irregularities. I have records of my attempts to investigate, all blocked by the Hale family's influence. Thomas's voice grew stronger. And I have 5 years of living with the knowledge that my sister's death was swept under the rug because her husband had money and I didn't. Walsh entered the letters into evidence. Morrison accepted them, began reading. His expression grew increasingly grave as he worked through page after page of Catherine's desperate words. The courtroom waited in tense silence. Finally, Morrison looked up. These letters describe abuse remarkably similar to what Mrs. Lydia Hale has testified to experiencing. Yes, Your Honor, the pattern is identical. That doesn't prove fraud regarding the marriage. No, but this does. Walsh produced another document. Catherine Reeves's death certificate, filed in Harlan County in 1872. Note the date discrepancies. The date of death conflicts with witness statements. Note the signatures. The coroner who signed this certificate was later dismissed for accepting bribes. Note the witnesses, both employed by the Hale family at the time. Morrison studied the certificate. These irregularities are concerning, but they don't necessarily invalidate the death certificate. Perhaps not alone, Your Honor, but consider this. Jonathan Hale married Lydia 6 months after Catherine's death. The law requires a year-long waiting period for widowers before remarriage. He violated that statute. Brennan stood. The waiting period is customary, not mandatory. It's codified in territorial law, Mr. Brennan, Section 412 of the marital statutes. I have the citation right here. Walsh slid the law book across to Morrison. The judge read, his frown deepening. Ms. Walsh is correct. The statute is clear. Widowers must wait 1 year before remarrying. Mr. Hale married Mrs. Lydia Hale after only 6 months? 5 months and 3 weeks, to be precise, Your Honor. He rushed the marriage, likely to establish a new legal claim before anyone could thoroughly investigate Catherine's death. Jonathan finally showed emotion. His face darkened, his hands clenched on the table. Brennan placed a restraining hand on his shoulder, whispered urgently. Morrison set down the law book. This is troubling. Mr. Brennan, do you have explanation for your client's violation of the waiting period? Brennan stood smoothly. Your Honor, my client was unaware of the technical requirement. He acted in good faith. Ignorance of the law is not a defense, Counselor. You know this. Perhaps not. But the marriage was performed by a licensed minister, properly witnessed and officially recorded. Those facts don't change regardless of timing irregularities. They change if the marriage violates standing law, Walsh countered. A marriage performed in violation of statutory requirements is voidable, Your Honor. At minimum, the court should investigate the circumstances before enforcing marital rights that may not legally exist. Morrison leaned back, steepled his fingers. Mr. Brennan, I'm inclined to grant Ms. Walsh's motion for further investigation. These irregularities raise legitimate questions. Your Honor, with respect, this is exactly the kind of delay tactic I warned about. Miss Walsh is throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. The simple facts remain. Mrs. Hale is married to my client. She fled that marriage illegally. Mr. Cross harbored her in violation of my client's rights. Those facts are undisputed. The validity of those rights is very much in dispute, Walsh shot back. Morrison's gavel came down again. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take a 30-minute recess to review these materials properly. Miss Walsh, prepare to argue why this marriage should be invalidated. Mr. Brennan, prepare to defend its validity. When we reconvene, I want legal arguments, not grandstanding. He stood, and everyone rose with him. As Morrison disappeared into his chambers, the courtroom exploded into conversation. Ethan turned to Lydia. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know. That could have gone better, could have gone worse." She was trembling slightly. "What do you think Morrison will decide?" "I think he's actually considering it. That's more than I expected." Walsh gathered her documents. Brennan's rattled. "Did you see how quickly he moved to shut down discussion? He knows the marriage has vulnerabilities." "Will Morrison actually invalidate it?" Ethan asked. "Honestly, I don't know. He's a fair judge, but he's also conservative. He doesn't like overturning established contracts. But the statute violation is clear, and the Catherine evidence creates a pattern that's hard to ignore." She looked at Thomas, who sat quietly at the end of their table. "Thank you for coming, for speaking up." Thomas nodded. "I should have done it 5 years ago, should have fought harder. Maybe if I had, Catherine would have justice, and this young woman wouldn't be in this position." "You're fighting now," Lydia said softly. "That's what matters." The 30 minutes crawled by. Ethan watched the clock, watched the crowd, watched Jonathan Hale conferring intensely with his lawyers. Whatever they were planning, it involved a lot of animated whispering and document shuffling. When Morrison finally returned, the bailiff called for order. The judge looked tired, like the weight of what he was about to do had aged him in half an hour. "I've reviewed the materials," he began, "and I'm troubled by what I've seen. The letters from Catherine Reeves paint a disturbing picture. The death certificate irregularities raise questions, and the statutory violation regarding the waiting period is clear and undisputed." Hope flared in Ethan's chest, but Morrison wasn't finished. "However, I'm also mindful that marriage is a sacred institution, not to be dissolved lightly. The fact that Mr. Hale violated a waiting period, while legally problematic, doesn't necessarily invalidate the marriage itself. The ceremony was proper. The license was filed. By all technical measures, the marriage exists." The Hope guttered. Ethan felt Lydia sag beside him. "That said," Morrison continued, "the pattern of behavior described by both Mrs. Catherine Reeves and Mrs. Lydia Hale cannot be ignored. If Mr. Hale did indeed abuse his first wife, if he did indeed rush into a second marriage to avoid scrutiny, that speaks to character and intent in ways this court must consider." He paused, seemed to wrestle with something internal. Then he made his decision. "I'm ordering a full investigation into Catherine Reeves's death and the circumstances surrounding Mr. Hale's marriage to Mrs. Lydia Hale. Until that investigation concludes, I'm suspending any orders regarding Mrs. Hale's return to her husband. She will remain in Mr. Cross's custody." "Your Honor!" Brennan was on his feet. "You can't seriously—" "I can, and I am, Mr. Brennan. Sit down. This is unprecedented. So is a man potentially marrying his second wife while still under investigation for his first wife's suspicious death. Sit down." Brennan sat, his face mottled with anger. Morrison continued, "Furthermore, I'm dismissing the damages claim against Mr. Cross. While his refusal to cooperate with lawful authority was ill-advised, it appears he acted in good faith belief that Mrs. Hale was in danger. Given the evidence now before this court, that belief seems reasonable." Ethan couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was hearing. They'd won. Not completely, not permanently, but they'd won this round. "The investigation will be conducted by territorial authorities, not local law enforcement. I want impartial eyes on this matter. We'll reconvene in 60 days to review findings." Morrison's gavel came down. "This hearing is adjourned." The courtroom erupted, people shouting, arguing, celebrating. Ethan heard none of it. He was focused on Lydia, who'd buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. Relief, shock, disbelief, all of it pouring out at once. Walsh was grinning, actually grinning. "We did it. I can't believe we actually did it." "What happens now?" Ethan managed. "Now we wait for the investigation. But Cross, listen to me." Morrison suspended the return order. "That means Lydia doesn't go back to Jonathan. Not today, not until the investigation concludes. And if that investigation finds what I think it will find, she may never have to go back." Thomas stood, offered his hand to Ethan. "Thank you for standing with her, for giving my sister's story a chance to matter. Thank you for bringing it forward, for being brave enough to try again." Across the aisle, Jonathan Hale sat motionless, his face a mask of controlled fury. His lawyers were packing up quickly, clearly eager to regroup away from the crowd. As they stood to leave, Jonathan's eyes found Lydia. The look he gave her was pure ice, pure hate, pure promise of retribution. Lydia shrank back. Ethan moved between them, blocking the line of sight. "Stay away from her," he said quietly. "Or investigation or no investigation, I'll make sure everyone in this territory knows exactly what you are." Jonathan's smile was cold. "This isn't over, Cross. You've won a delay, nothing more. When the investigation concludes, and it will conclude in my favor because I have resources you can't imagine, I'll have my wife back, and I'll have everything you own as compensation for this humiliation. We'll see? Yes, we will." Jonathan left, his lawyers trailing behind. The crowd parted for them, some people nodding respectfully, others glaring with open hostility. The tide of public opinion was shifting, but Jonathan still had allies, still had power. This wasn't over. Ethan knew that. But for today, they'd survived. Outside the courthouse, Sarah and Michael broke free from Mrs. Chen and ran to Ethan. He caught them both, held them tight, feeling the reality of what they'd just accomplished sink in. "Did we win, Papa?" Michael asked. "We didn't lose. That's good enough for now." Sarah pulled back, looked up at him with those serious eyes. "Lydia's staying?" "She's staying." "Good." She turned to Lydia, who'd followed them out. "You're still family, right?" Lydia knelt down, eye level with the little girl. "If you'll have me, we'll have you." "Right, Michael?" "Right. You make the good pancakes." Despite everything, Lydia laughed. "I do make the good pancakes." They gathered, Ethan, Lydia, the children, Walsh, Thomas, and the Chens, on the courthouse lawn while the town buzzed around them. Someone mentioned celebration, but it felt premature. They'd won a battle, not the war. "What happens during the investigation?" Lydia asked Walsh. "Territorial investigators will review everything. Catherine's death, the marriage documents, Jonathan's finances and business dealings. They'll interview witnesses, examine evidence, build a complete picture. It could take the full 60 days, maybe longer. And if they find Jonathan did something illegal, then the marriage could be annulled. You'd be free. He'd likely face criminal charges. And if they don't find anything," Walsh's expression grew serious. "Then we're back where we started. But Lydia, they're going to find something. Men like Jonathan don't stay clean. They can't. Their arrogance makes them sloppy." Ethan hoped she was right. But 60 days was a long time. 60 days of waiting, wondering, looking over their shoulders for the next attack. They made their way back to the ranch in a loose caravan. Ethan's wagon with Lydia and the children, the Chens in theirs, Walsh and Thomas sharing a rented buggy. The spring sun was warm, the fields were greening up, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like he could breathe. At the ranch, Mrs. Chen insisted on cooking a proper meal. Dr. Chen helped Ethan with evening chores while Walsh and Thomas discussed legal strategy on the porch. The children played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the wind. It felt normal, almost peaceful. Lydia found Ethan in the barn as the sun was setting. He was feeding the horses, going through the familiar routine that centered him when everything else felt chaotic. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey yourself." "Hell of a day." That's one way to put it. She leaned against the stall door, watching him work. "I keep waiting to wake up, to find out this was all a dream and I'm still trapped in Jonathan's house." "Not a dream. You're here. You're safe. For now. But Ethan, what if the investigation doesn't find anything? What if Jonathan's covered his tracks too well?" He set down the feed bucket, turned to face her. "Then we deal with it. Same way we've dealt with everything else. Together." "You keep saying that word. Together. Like it's simple." "It is simple. Complicated, but simple." She smiled despite herself. "That doesn't make sense." "Most important things don't." He moved closer, reached for her hand. "Lydia, I meant what I said last night. About choosing. About love. That doesn't change based on what some investigation finds. That's not how this works." "How does it work?" "Honestly, I'm making it up as I go. But I know this much. I'm better with you than without you. My kids are better with you. This whole place is better with you. So whatever comes next, whatever obstacles or complications or legal nightmares, we face them as a unit, as family." Lydia's eyes filled. "I've never had that. Real family that chose me instead of being stuck with me. You have it now. All of us. The Chens, Walsh, Thomas, we all chose you. You're not alone anymore. She kissed him then, properly this time, without the desperation of the previous night. This kiss was softer, sweeter, full of possibility instead of fear. When they broke apart, Lydia rested her forehead against his. What if I'm broken? What if Jonathan damaged me too much to be whole again? Then you're broken. So what? I'm broken too. Anna's death broke me. This last year broke me more. But broken doesn't mean useless. Doesn't mean incapable of love or joy or building something new. It just means we have cracks. And maybe those cracks let the light in. She laughed, but it was wet with tears. That's almost poetic. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation as a practical man to maintain. They stood together in the quiet barn, holding each other while the world settled around them. Outside, they could hear the children playing, Mrs. Chen calling them for dinner, the ordinary sounds of life continuing despite everything. The 60 days that followed were strange, anticipatory, like living in the pause between lightning and thunder. The territorial investigators arrived within a week. 2 serious men who interviewed everyone, examined everything, and gave away nothing. They spent 3 days at Jonathan's estate, 2 days talking to former servants and business associates, another week reviewing financial records and legal documents. Jonathan himself remained visible, conducting business as usual, showing up at town council meetings, making donations to the church, playing the role of wronged husband with perfect precision. Some people believed it, others didn't. The town divided along familiar lines, those with power supporting Jonathan, those without quietly hoping for his downfall. Ethan kept his head down and worked. The ranch needed attention after weeks of neglect. Fences needed mending, fields needed planting, animals needed tending. The familiar rhythms of labor helped pass the time. Lydia threw herself into domestic life with intensity that sometimes worried him. She cooked elaborate meals, cleaned obsessively, reorganized every cupboard and closet. Keeping busy, he realized, keeping the fear at bay through constant motion. You don't have to earn your place here, he told her one evening, watching her scrub an already clean floor. You belong regardless of how much you contribute. I know. Intellectually, I know, but my hands need to stay busy or my brain starts spinning. What's it spinning about? She sat back on her heels. What happens if we lose? If Jonathan gets me back? If this whole thing was just a brief escape before the inevitable? That's not going to happen. You can't know that. No, but I can believe it. And I can prepare for alternatives if I'm wrong. What alternatives? Ethan had been thinking about this constantly, working through scenarios, planning contingencies. If Morrison rules against us, we have maybe an hour before they try to enforce it. In that hour, we run. I've got money hidden, supplies packed, a route planned. We head north into the mountains, cross into the next territory, start over with new names. Lydia stared at him. You've actually planned this. Every detail. Because I meant what I said, I'm not letting Jonathan have you. If the law fails, we go around it. That makes you a fugitive. I've been called worse. She shook her head, but she was smiling. You're insane. Probably, but I'm insane with excellent organizational skills. The smile faded. What about Sarah and Michael? You can't make them fugitives. They're my children. They go where I go. And before you argue, I've talked to them about it, explained the possibilities. They're scared but willing. They'd rather have you and uncertainty than lose you and stay comfortable. They're children. They don't understand. They understand enough. And they get to have opinions about their family. Lydia started crying then. Not the desperate sobs of fear, but quieter tears of something else. Gratitude, maybe. Or disbelief that this was real. Ethan pulled her close, let her cry against his shoulder. Outside, spring was giving way to summer. The days were getting longer, warmer. The world was blooming, oblivious to their drama. On day 47 of the 60-day wait, Thomas Reeves returned to Frost Creek with news. He found them at the ranch, arrived unexpectedly in a hired wagon. His face was grim. The investigators found something, he said without preamble, about Catherine's death. Everyone gathered in the kitchen. Ethan, Lydia, the children sent to play outside despite their protests. Walsh had been staying at the boarding house but arrived within an hour of getting the message. Thomas spread documents across the table. The original coroner who signed Catherine's death certificate, he kept private notes, Notes he never filed officially. Notes that said he suspected foul play but was pressured to call it an accident. Pressured by whom? Walsh asked. Jonathan's father. The elder Mr. Hale was still alive then. He visited the coroner personally, made it clear that the family expected a clean ruling. The coroner complied. Do we have these notes? Walsh was already reaching for the documents. We do. The coroner died 2 years ago, but his widow found them among his effects when I explained what we were investigating. She's willing to testify that her husband was coerced. Lydia leaned forward. What did the notes say about how Catherine died? Thomas's expression grew pained. That the angle of her fall was inconsistent with an accidental tumble, that she had defensive wounds on her arms, that the timing, falling downstairs she'd navigated safely hundreds of times, was suspicious. He thought someone pushed her. He just couldn't prove it. Silence fell over the kitchen. Ethan felt cold despite the summer warmth. Jonathan killed her, Lydia whispered. Actually, killed her. We can't prove that, Thomas said. The coroner didn't witness it. It's still circumstantial. But combined with everything else, the pattern of abuse, the rushed second marriage, the death certificate irregularities, it builds a case. Walsh was already making notes. This is enough. This is absolutely enough. Morrison will have to invalidate the marriage. He can't enforce marital rights when there's credible evidence the husband murdered his first wife. Will there be criminal charges? Ethan asked. That's up to the territorial prosecutor, but yes, I'd expect charges. Murder is harder to prove after 5 years, but with the coroner's notes, the witness testimony, the pattern evidence, they have enough to indict. Lydia stood abruptly, walked to the window. Ethan could see her shoulders shaking. Lydia, he said softly, I could have been her. If I'd stayed even one more week, if I hadn't run into that blizzard, if you hadn't found me. Her voice broke. I would have died in that house. An accident, they would have called it, just like Catherine. Ethan went to her, wrapped his arms around her from behind. But you didn't stay. You ran. You survived. And now you're helping make sure he can't do this to anyone else. Does that make it better? Does it bring Catherine back? No. But it means her death wasn't meaningless. It means she helped save you, even 5 years later. Lydia turned in his arms, buried her face against his chest. I want this to be over. I want to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. Soon, he promised. Soon. The reconvened hearing happened on day 60 exactly. Morrison's courtroom was packed again, but the atmosphere was different this time. Darker, heavier. Word about the coroner's notes had leaked, and the town buzzed with speculation about murder and cover-ups and justice delayed. Jonathan sat at the plaintiff's table flanked by lawyers, but his confidence had cracked. He looked thinner, haggard, like the 60-day wait had cost him sleep. His eyes kept darting to the door like he was considering running. Morrison entered, gavelled for silence, and got right to business. I've reviewed the investigator's report, he began, and I've examined the additional evidence brought forward by Mr. Reeves. I've also consulted with the territorial prosecutor regarding potential criminal charges. This is no longer just a civil matter of marital rights. This court is now considering questions of fraud, false documentation, and potentially homicide. The gallery erupted in whispers. Morrison waited for quiet. Mr. Brennan, I'm going to give you one opportunity to withdraw from this case before I issue my ruling. Given the evidence that's emerged, continuing to represent Mr. Hale could damage your professional reputation significantly. Brennan stood slowly. He conferred briefly with Jonathan, who shook his head violently. Brennan looked like he wanted to argue, but finally said, My client wishes to continue, Your Honor. Very well, then let me be clear about my findings. Morrison opened a thick folder. The marriage between Jonathan Hale and Lydia Hale violated territorial statute regarding the mandatory waiting period for widowers. That alone makes the marriage voidable. Additionally, the evidence suggests Mr. Hale deliberately misrepresented his marital status and rushed the marriage to avoid scrutiny regarding his first wife's death. That constitutes fraud in the inducement of marriage. Your Honor, Brennan tried to interrupt. I'm not finished. Furthermore, the pattern of abuse described by both Catherine Reeves and Lydia Hale, combined with the suspicious circumstances of Catherine's death, creates a reasonable belief that Mr. Hale poses a danger to his current wife. A court cannot and will not enforce marital rights that would place a woman in danger of her life. Morrison's voice grew harder, more forceful. Therefore, I am issuing the following orders. First, The marriage between Jonathan Hale and Lydia Hale is hereby annulled on grounds of fraud and statutory violation. Second, all claims for damages against Ethan Cross are dismissed with prejudice. Third, I am referring this matter to the territorial prosecutor for criminal investigation into the death of Catherine Reeves. And fourth, I am issuing a protective order barring Jonathan Hale from contacting or approaching Lydia Hale pending the outcome of criminal proceedings. The gavel came down. Final. Absolute. Lydia made a sound, half sob, half laugh. Ethan grabbed her hand, held on tight while the courtroom exploded around them. People shouting, cheering, arguing, Jonathan on his feet, his face purple with rage, Brennan trying to restrain him. Walsh was gathering documents, already preparing for the next phase. Thomas sat quietly, tears streaming down his face. Catherine's story had finally been heard. Finally mattered. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Mr. Hale, you will sit down and remain calm, or I will hold you in contempt. This hearing is concluded. Jonathan sat, but his eyes burned with fury. As Morrison left the bench, as people began filing out, Jonathan's gaze found Lydia one last time. This time she met it, lifted her chin, held his stare, showed him she wasn't afraid anymore. And after a long moment, Jonathan looked away. The ride back to the ranch felt surreal. Lydia kept touching her wrist, her neck, like checking to make sure she was real, that this had actually happened. Free, she kept whispering. I'm actually free. You're free, Ethan confirmed. What happens now? Now you live. Actually live, not just survive. You figure out who you are when you're not running or hiding. You make choices because you want to, not because you have to. That sounds terrifying. Probably, but you won't do it alone. She looked at him, something shifting in her expression. Ethan Cross, are you proposing something? Not yet. We've got time. Time to heal, time to know each other outside of crisis, time to make sure this is real and not just trauma bonding. Trauma bonding, she repeated. That's romantic. I'm a practical man. Sue me. I might. I'm finally legally able to sue people. They laughed, and it felt good. Clean. Like maybe they actually could have something normal on the other side of all this. At the ranch, Sarah and Michael were waiting on the porch with Mrs. Chen. When they saw Lydia's face, they started cheering. We won, Sarah called. We won, Lydia confirmed. Michael ran to her, wrapped his arms around her waist. So you're staying forever? If you'll have me. We'll have you, right, Papa? Ethan looked at this makeshift family they'd built. 2 children who'd lost their mother, 1 woman who'd nearly lost everything, and himself, a widower who'd forgotten how to hope, broken pieces that somehow fit together better than they had any right to. Right, he said, we'll have her. That evening they had dinner together, all of them, including the Chens, Walsh, and Thomas. Mrs. Chen cooked enough food for an army, and they ate until they were uncomfortably full, telling stories and laughing and pretending the last few months hadn't been a waking nightmare. Later, after everyone had left and the children were asleep, Ethan found Lydia on the porch. She sat on the steps, looking up at the stars. Thinking about anything in particular? He asked, settling beside her. About how strange it is, how fast everything changed. 2 months ago I was dying in a snowbank. Now I'm here, free, with people who actually care whether I live or die. Life's like that sometimes. Terrible one moment, bearable the next. Is this bearable, or is it more than that? Ethan considered. It's more. It's good. It's the kind of good I forgot existed. Lydia leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm going to need time to figure out who I am outside of being someone's property, to heal from everything that happened. I know, take all the time you need. And if healing changes me, if I become someone different, then I'll get to know that person too. Might even like her better. She laughed softly. You're supposed to say the cheesy thing, that you'll love me no matter what. I'm not good at cheesy, but I mean it. Whoever you become, we'll figure it out. That's what this is, figuring it out together. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The wind rustled through the new leaves. The world kept turning, indifferent to human drama. Ethan? Lydia said quietly. Yeah? Thank you for not leaving me in the snow. Thank you for giving me a reason to stop just existing and start living again. She turned her head, kissed his cheek. "We're quite a pair, two broken people stumbling towards something better. Best kind of pair there is." They stayed on the porch until the stars began to fade, talking about small things and big things and everything in between, making plans for tomorrow, next week, next year, building a future one conversation at a time. Inside, Sarah appeared at her bedroom window, watched them for a moment, then smiled and returned to bed. Her papa had found something worth fighting for. Lydia had found safety and family, and she and Michael had gained someone who made really good pancakes. In her 8-year-old wisdom, Sarah decided that was about as close to a happy ending as real life offered. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. The weeks that followed brought changes both subtle and profound. Jonathan Hale was indicted for Catherine's murder. And while the trial would take months, the scandal effectively destroyed his standing in the community. His business partners distanced themselves. The social circles that had protected him suddenly found previous engagements whenever he appeared. Power built on fear and money crumbled fast when the fear evaporated. Lydia healed slowly, some days better than others. She had nightmares sometimes, woke up gasping and convinced she was back in Jonathan's house. Ethan learned to recognize the signs, learned when to offer comfort and when to give space. It wasn't smooth or easy, but they navigated it together. She started teaching at the local school 3 mornings a week, working with younger children on reading and arithmetic. The work gave her purpose beyond the ranch, beyond defining herself through relationships. She was good at it, patient and creative, and the children adored her. Sarah and Michael adapted with the resilience of youth. They stopped calling Lydia by her name and started calling her something else. Not Mama, that belonged to Anna forever, but something uniquely theirs. They settled on Liddy, and it stuck. Ethan rebuilt the barn roof with help from Dr. Chen and 2 other neighbors who'd quietly supported them through the hearing. The work was hard, physical, grounding. A reminder that life continued, that problems could be solved with effort and community. One evening, in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies, Lydia brought up the question that had been hovering unspoken for weeks. "What are we?" she asked. "You and me. What do we call this?" Ethan thought about it. "I don't know. Partnership, family, something that doesn't have a name yet? Do we need to name it? Probably not, but I wouldn't mind making it official. Eventually, when you're ready." She looked at him surprised. "Are you talking about marriage? Someday." "Not now. You just got out of a terrible one. But someday, if you wanted, if it felt right." "That's very cautious of you." "I'm a cautious man when it comes to things that matter." Lydia smiled, took his hand. "Ask me in a year. After I've had time to remember who I am. After we've had time to make sure this works outside of crisis. After the kids have had time to adjust. Then ask me properly, and I'll give you a proper answer." "Deal." "But Ethan, I already know what the answer will be." His heart jumped. "Yeah?" "Yeah." They kissed as the fireflies danced around them, as the summer night wrapped them in warmth, as the future stretched out full of possibility instead of fear. Inside the house, Sarah heard the murmur of voices and smiled. She'd been right about Lydia, right that she and Papa fit together in the good way, the way that made everyone better instead of smaller. She returned to the letter she was writing, a school assignment about courage. She wrote about her Papa standing up to powerful men, about Lydia running through a blizzard toward freedom, about how sometimes bravery looked like fighting and sometimes it looked like choosing to hope when hope seemed impossible. Her teacher would probably call it too advanced for an 8-year-old, but Sarah didn't care. She'd learned these lessons firsthand, had watched her family nearly break and then rebuild stronger than before. And if that wasn't worth writing about, she didn't know what was. A year later, on a crisp October morning, Ethan Cross and Lydia Hale, no longer legally Hale, but not yet Cross, stood in front of a small gathering and made new promises to each other. Simple promises, honest ones. To show up, to care, to fight for each other when needed and give space when necessary. To build something together that honored their pasts without being trapped by them. Sarah and Michael stood up front as witnesses, grinning identical grins. Mrs. Chen cried happy tears. Dr. Chen provided the rings. Thomas Reeves had traveled from Denver to attend, bringing news that Jonathan's trial had concluded with a guilty verdict. Life sentence. He'd never hurt anyone again. Rebecca Walsh officiated, having earned her license to perform marriages specifically for this occasion. She kept it brief and practical, knowing the couple well enough to skip the flowery language. When she pronounced them married, Ethan kissed his wife like he was sealing a promise he intended to keep until his last breath. And Lydia, just Lydia now, no longer defined by the men who'd tried to own her, kissed him back with the fierce joy of someone who'd fought their way to a future they'd thought impossible. The reception was small. Dancing in the barn, food from everyone who'd supported them, music from the local fiddler. It wasn't fancy, but it was real, earned, built on the foundation of choices made freely rather than imposed by circumstance. As the evening wound down, as guests filtered away and children fell asleep in hay bales, Ethan and Lydia stood outside under the stars one more time. "Think it'll work?" Lydia asked. "This marriage thing, after everything? I think we've got better odds than most. We know how bad it can get. We've seen each other at our worst. We've fought battles together. If we can survive that, we can probably survive ordinary life." "Ordinary life," she repeated, testing the words. "That sounds wonderful." "It does, doesn't it?" She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The wind carried the scent of coming winter. Change was constant, inevitable, but they'd face it together. "Ethan?" Lydia said softly. "Yeah?" "Thank you for being stubborn, for refusing to give up even when giving up made sense. Thank you for being brave enough to run through that blizzard, for choosing survival over safety. We're quite a team. Best kind of team there is." They stood together under the stars, two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something good anyway. Their story wasn't perfect, wasn't clean or simple or easy to tell, but it was theirs, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Inside the barn, Sarah woke up enough to see them through the door. She smiled, pulled the blanket tighter, and fell back asleep knowing her family was whole. The storm that had brought Lydia to their door had passed, but it had left behind something unexpected. Not just survival, but life. Not just shelter, but home. Not just existence, but hope. And sometimes, when the winter wind howled and the snow fell thick, Ethan would think about that night he'd found her dying in the drifts, about the choice he'd made to carry her inside instead of walking away. One choice, one moment of compassion in a blizzard. It had changed everything, and he'd never regretted it once.